Okay. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2025 Focus on Conservation online conference, Routes to Resilience. This online event will explore how cultural heritage professionals and institutions can build resilience while facing increasing challenges in safeguarding their collections. This year's convening will center on the strategies and approaches that support the long-term sustainability of collections and conservation practices, as well as supporting resilience of institutions and staff. My name is Melissa Miller, and I'm the Collections Emergency Program Specialist at the Smithsonian Institution's National Collections Program. I'm also a member of the planning committee for this conference, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator for the day. This is the third day of this 4-day conference, and today's theme is Resilient Resources and Partnerships. Today, we will turn to the question of resources and funding. Museums worldwide share the challenge of limited financial and operational capacities, often resulting in deferred preservation efforts. Presentations and dialogues today will explore how strategies for post-crisis recovery, sustainable models, and community engagement as a means to strengthen organizational resilience. For those of you who are joining the conference for the first time today, welcome, and just a couple of quick technical notes. Closed captioning is available. To turn it on, press the CC button in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. For any technical questions, please write to Prince Media, our IT partner, directly in the Zoom chat. To do so, click the options feature in the Zoom chat and type in Prince Media to write to them directly. If you have additional resources or links related to the presentations that we have today, we invite you to share those with others by popping those into the Zoom chat to everyone. If you have content-related questions for the speakers, please use Slido. This is a free platform that allows you to vote on questions that others have posed and that you are also interested in. This highlights the importance of those questions and helps us, your moderators, ask the ones that are most pressing on your minds. The link to Slido will be visible on your screen throughout the day and will also be dropped into the Zoom chat for everyone to access. We are also using Slido's poll feature for some audience participation. So the first tab you'll see is the Q&A, and the second tab is for the poll questions. If you're not already in there, I invite you to open up Slido and check it out right now because we're going to try out the poll feature this morning. So the poll question that we have for you all this morning is most of your project funding on the local, national, or international level? And we have, thank you so much, Jenny. We have the live word cloud up now. You can see as everybody's answering the adjustment of the stats. So right now it looks like national and local are the dominant. Very cool. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And please keep responding. We love to see these. I want to say, lastly, on the technical notes, we are recording this presentation, all of the presentations of the conference, and we'll publish them online. Your registration for this event will give you access to those recordings, and you will receive an email when they are available. Thanks again for being here, everyone. And as we begin our presentations for the day, I'd like to remind speakers and audience members to turn off your cameras and microphones unless you're presenting. Okay, without further ado, our opening talk this morning, our first keynote of two, is coming to us from Elke Selter. Elke, would you mind turning on your camera and joining me? Hi. So I'll just quickly introduce you and then I'll hand it over to you. Elke worked as a program director with ALIF, the International Alliance for the Protection of Heritage, which is the principal global fund for heritage in crisis. She is a specialist in heritage protection in emergencies, bringing extensive experience in heritage conservation. And she's going to talk to us today about her work fundraising and cooperating in support of heritage in emergencies. Take it away.
Thank you, Melissa, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon in my part of the world, but I think good morning or good evening for some of you. And let me share my screen so that we can get started. I hope you can all see this. So as Melissa just said, I'll talk to you about partnerships and funding, particularly for emergencies. And we just saw let me reduce this so that I can see my own slides. Thank you. So I think the pictures that are on the right of my slide are probably recognizable for many of you. At least I assume so, because these have about 10 years ago, it's been a bit more than 10, gone around the world. There's, of course, it's videos that were developed by Daesh, by ISIS, when they were destroying the Mosul Museum, but they were taken on by major media channels, BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, what have you, and from there to many national TV, and so they've been shown very widely. These are just screenshots from the videos, and I try to get a few that had as few recognizable people on it as possible. And I think this is for collections, a bit what the video of the destruction of the Bamiyan Buddhas was for people, which is more my own background, dealing with sites. That is to say, one of the first or the first, perhaps one of the only times that we actually see the destruction happening. In many cases, and that has been the reality of much of my professional career, you arrive after the damage has been done, or after the looting has happened, and so you deal with the aftermath, but you rarely know what really happened. And I think the violence, but also the direct impact, because you had these people with chisels and hammers and saws, and it was so physical that it's something that really struck our minds. And of course, the war didn't stop there. It continued for quite another while, and the Mosul Museum also got damaged more and more. And the picture that you see on the left is one, I think, of the most striking images of how the museum was found once it was accessible again to expert teams. And there you see that there's also been later damage then by explosions. But so basically what you had was a heavily damaged institution, an institution that was housing a very important collection of especially these sculptures, and where the building itself, as well as the collection, was completely demolished. And so you basically had piles of rubble in which it was not always even easy to distinguish which rubble was from the building or its interior, its furniture, or from the artifacts. And I think it's not an exaggeration to say that this is about as much damage as you can imagine there to be to a cultural institution. But I don't want this to be a presentation about damage, but one about what can be done after, because we're talking resilience, of course. And so I wanted to talk about this project because in the aftermath of the conflict, and that's now about 7-8 years ago, a number of partners came together to bring back the museum, the premises, but also the exhibition and the collection. It's a partnership that, of course, involves the Iraqi authorities and the team of the Mosul Museum, but that includes the World Monument Fund, which is dealing with the building and the exhibition, and it includes the Smithsonian through its Cultural Rescue Initiative, which have been involved very much in the beginning in assessing what exactly happened in this museum, but is also still involved today in various forms of training. And then there is the involvement of the Louvre and its experts who have been spending countless hours with the team of the Mosel Museum staff to put back together a number of these very heavily damaged statues or artworks. And it's funded by Alif, which is where I was working until a couple of weeks ago, and which is also how I was in one way or the other involved in this project. But it is one, you can find it widely on the internet. So in case you're interested in more, it's not that hard to find more information about it. The reason why I want to show you this project is, of course, because it is about resilience, but for me, it's about much more than that. It's about hope. I think many people who are facing a situation in which their heritage is attacked or their heritage is destroyed. It doesn't have to be deliberate. It can also be in a disaster, for instance, have this feeling that things are lost forever. And that is something that I've also come across very often during my career working in a variety of emergency situations. And for me, that this project shows the opposite. It shows that even when faced with extreme forms of damage, with extreme forms of destruction, that doesn't have to be the end. And that if you have the right people coming together, if you have experts, because we do in our sector have that expertise, you just need to have the people who are willing to put the time and the effort into it and who want to work, especially in the early days. It was still quite dangerous. There were unexploded devices and so on. Living conditions were far from great. You have to be willing to, leave Paris and work in very different circumstances. But if you have all these people coming together and you have, in this case, also someone who's willing to pay for it, a whole lot can be done. And I think for me, Mosel Museum, which will hopefully reopen towards, well, around this time next year, can be exactly that symbol, a symbol of major destruction, of one of the first times that we saw that destruction happening, but afterwards also of the capacities that our sector has to bring back that hope and to show that it's not that easy to erase the traces of culture and of history. I've already mentioned that I've come across in my career quite a few times when people feel that things are lost forever. And prior to Alif, I worked a lot with UNESCO and did a lot of assessments after disasters or after a conflict. And then you're there as an external person and you're surrounded by a team of local experts who've come out of often very traumatic periods in their life. And that doesn't have to be a long time conflict. It can also be an earthquake, a one-off event, but one that had such a big impact that it leaves people quite shaken. And the reality of that kind of assessments is, of course, you take stock of the situation, of what the damage is. And then at some point, you need to start putting dollar figures next to that stock taking that you have done. And I've quite often found myself in discussions with local teams who find it extremely hard to put a dollar amount to the damage that they have seen. And it almost becomes a philosophical debate on the fact that heritage is unique and irreplaceable and that what is lost forever. And I'm not denying that. I know you can't turn back time. That's a very unfortunate reality of life. But I also really truly believe that there's a lot of value in looking forwards. Even if things have been very badly damaged, there's always a future in front of you. And I hope that for those of you who might ever be in a situation where you have to do this kind of exercise, that this example can can be one that stays in the back of your mind, because I think it shows not just that technically a lot of things are possible, but also that at some point you can look at this kind of project, and that does have a cost. It comes at a price. And so you can make a budget, not one that reflects how much these objects were worth, but at how much it costs to come back to a form of presentation of these objects. I'll just add in a footnote, these are not recent pictures. These are from about a year ago. Things have advanced quite a bit since, but I prefer to leave it to the teams who are working on it to reveal the results of their work once they're closer to finishing in a few months from now. But I think it shows already enough of what they are moving towards. And so I just wanted to show you mostly these logos, actually, because I hope that for those of you, I hope not all of you never have to face an emergency, but it's quite unfortunate. We seem to have more and more of them, not necessarily wars, but definitely this last month, the number of floods, the number of typhoons, of hurricanes, leaving high degrees of damage seems to be increasing, and there are grant-making organizations out there who are specifically created to provide support financially in this kind of situations. And the bottom three, so ALIV, Culture Emergency Response, which is based in the Netherlands, ALIV is in Switzerland, and the Culture Protection Fund in the UK, are created for that purpose. If you're in Europe, not all of them might be able to provide you funding. Some of them are for let's say vulnerable countries primarily, but do have a look, get in touch with them. Many of them have procedures for providing rapid funding in a situation where you may need it. And I've also added UNESCO. I'm not ignoring them, but of course, they're not a grant maker. That's not their raison d'être. It's not why they've been created. But especially under some of their conventions, like World Heritage, Intangible Heritage, and so on, they do also have specific mechanisms for emergency funding. And if you're working for a government agency, that might also be an entry point for you. But so I didn't want to, I know we're very short in time, but I didn't want to skip that slide just in case it ever becomes useful for any one of you. Now, I spent just under 2 decades being probably more on the side where you are. I was writing grant proposals, I was dealing with donors, I was getting rejected over and over and over again, and every now and then I got lucky and never really figured out why one project was funded and another one not. And then I moved to the donor side, and I was managing ALIV's program team, which means I had a team with me, and we were the first entry point for receiving the proposals and for doing a first kind of sifting through proposals, and those that were okay for funding would then be moved up by us through the system, because we had different layers of evaluation. And so that means that these past years I've gone through hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of project proposals and really sat on that other end of the table. And these past few months, when I knew I was leaving and we were trying to process one more batch of projects before I left, and it's kind of it made me think about, or at least wonder, of all these proposals that we receive, why do some get funding and why others don't? And sometimes that's very obvious because they're really terrible proposals. But for many, that's not that clear. And so I've tried to group together some of the things that I have learned on the donor side that I think might be useful for you. And I'll share that with you in the next 10 remaining minutes. And to start with, I think We all know, at least we feel, because it's not always visible in actual numbers, that the amount of available funding is getting less and less. It's definitely the case for those of you who are depending on public funding, on funding from your own governments. Culture ministries are traditionally the least funded. And whenever funding cuts are needed, it's with the culture ministries that these funding cuts happen, making them even poorer, right? I'm not saying anything new there. Aside from that, and that means that that's a lot of institutions that have traditionally just relied on their public funding now see themselves also more and more in a fundraising mode and trying to get external funding to come in. But also that external funding is not doing so great. Especially with the dismantling of US aid and a number of European donors, which have kind of traditionally been among the bigger funders out there, have been reducing their funding or reallocating funding to things like defense and security and so on. Means that the pot of available funding is less and less. I'm not saying anything new here. We all feel that. But it means if you're sitting in a donor agency that you get vastly more proposals. You get vastly more proposals and your funding pot doesn't get any bigger either, right? I haven't faced myself a reduction in funding, but even if your funding remains stable, if you get the double amount of proposals, of course, the chances for those of you who are applying are reduced by half. And the sad reality is that also for a donor, you're not sitting on some bottomless pit of money. So you also have to make choices. And another truth is that the majority of the proposals that we received are good enough, meaning they meet all the necessary criteria that you're asking for. There's, however, very few projects that really stand out. And with that, I mean, probably if until about a year ago we would fund 1 in 20 projects, and these are not real figures. I'm just giving you an example. If until a year ago we would fund 1 in 20 projects, we're now probably funding about 1 in 30, and that's not because our funding the funding goes down, but because the number of proposals goes up. Out of these 30, there's probably about 26, 27 that tick all the boxes. Okay, but you're still only funding 1, which means you need to send a rejection email to 26 proposals who all meet the necessary criteria. Some people then go through the effort to sending an email to our generic email account asking why they didn't get funding because they ticked all the boxes. I think it's fair enough to say it doesn't work that way. It's not because you tick all the boxes that you automatically get the funding. You actually need to stand out. And how to do that is not so easy. We know that too. So for me, probably the key lesson I learned working at a donor is that we evaluate pretty much the exact opposite way in which you probably write your proposals. And I'm assuming here because I don't know all of you, but when an expert writes a proposal, you think about the need, the problem you want to address, how you're going to address that. And then you turn that into activities, and depending on what the demands are, you'll turn that into expected results and objectives and impact and indicators and all these, all these descriptions. And somewhere then the deadline of the call is approaching and you have a day left, and that's when you open an Excel file and you make a budget that is supposed to reflect all the things you've thought about already for many months. Even if you do it in more than a day, the amount of time dedicated to budget is significant, usually significantly less than that dedicated to activities. When we evaluate, we put both side by side. Sometimes I would even only just look at the budget first and then If that was not good enough, sometimes it didn't even make it to the written text. I think is in part because what the donor really gives you and what we are accountable for is the money, but also because a budget tells you very much about a project. And so I would like to advocate for try to make these connect a lot better. Do not make it an afterthought. Try to work on the budget when you are working on your activities, and do understand that the persons who are evaluating your proposal are disproportionately paying attention to your budget, sometimes much more than to the text that you have written. My second point sounds very logical, budget based on what you need, but it's not what is happening in reality. When there is a particular budget ceiling, for instance, if you have an application process in which you can ask for $100,000 maximum, I kid you not, more than 99% of the proposals that we receive are for anything in between 99,999 and $100,000. That is not the way in which you're supposed to make a budget. If you budget what you need, then there's either two options. Either you'll be under that 100,000, any number below, right? And then you can still decide whether there's additional activities that you want to add, but please do make sure that they fit. What many people then do is, if they're under, is that they go either inflate some budget, very often in the case with staff budgets, or they start adding activities which have nothing to do with what you had carefully thought through in your activity plan, right? You just add some random things that might also be useful, and they don't really make sense in the overall picture of what you want to do. Another option is that you budget what you need, and you need much more than $100,000. And what happens then is that sometimes you'll try to cut down on things. In some cases, that's possible. Some projects can be phased. But in many other cases, the reality is that then the grantee will call you up 6 months later in a total panic because the budget has been spent and they only have half a project and they can't really stop now. And what can they do? So be very careful with how you make your budget. Be very honest about it. I must say, with my fictional case with the 100,000 budget ceiling, if I get lists and lists of hundreds of applications that are all somewhere between this 99,000 and the 100,000, if at some point there is one that asks me for 57,614, I'm much more inclined to look at it in detail, because somehow that tells me these people have really asked for what they need. So let me have a clear look at what they need. Of all these others, I find it quite striking that digitizing a manuscript collection in China would cost just as much as restoring a museum in the Central African Republic or doing an evacuation in Haiti. It might be a coincidence, but just try to really reflect on what you need and look at how far that gets you. The
2 minutes, Elka.
Yeah, I know. It's my last slide, so I'm almost there. Where you're dealing with people who do know the sector, but who are not experts in everything and who are not experts necessarily to the extent that you are about that particular object or collection. So write a pitch, make it attractive, make it something that a professional but not expert public can understand. You're not writing a PhD. Add photos, make it something someone wants to read and know that they've probably been reading 50, 60, 70 of these proposals that day. So make it something they want to look at. Be realistic, but also be honest and avoid fluff, especially these questions on sustainability, peace building. I used to get a lot of very lofty goals and lofty ideas, which do not reflect what you're actually going to achieve, and actually indicate that you haven't really thought that true. Make it real. It doesn't have to be a massive goal, but it has to be an attainable goal. Try to avoid AI. I was there when I saw our first AI application coming in. We were getting more and more of them, and it's extremely easy to spot them, and they never get funded. So don't waste your own time and don't waste that of your donors. And then my final point is when in doubt, ask for advice. The donors that I showed you, they're all small organizations. You can reach them, you can reach out to them, and you can discuss your ideas before going through the lengthy process of applying. And most of them are very happy to provide you that advice. So with that, I'll hand back over to Melissa, and we, I think, can have questions later on. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alka. That was great and really enlightening. You pulling back the curtain into sort of the background and all the thought process that goes on. We are going to have a second keynote talk, and I'll call you back when we're ready for Q&A. As a reminder to all of the participants, you can drop your questions for Alka in the Slido, and she'll come back in about 30 minutes and we'll ask them your questions. So, moving on, we're going to have our second keynote talk today from Media Eckner. Media, are you there? Oh, great. Okay. Great. Okay. So Media is the Director General of ICOM, the International Council of Museums, and as such serves on the board of Blue Shield International, which protects cultural heritage under threat, and as trustee of the European Museum Forum. Her work is centered on organizational transformation and innovation, aiming to enhance the organization's ability to address global challenges and impact museums, cultural heritage, and communities. Thanks for joining us, Vidya.
Thank you very much, Melissa, and thank you, ICOM-CC and the organizing committee, to invite me to this conference on Conservation 2025, Routes to Resilience. So thank you, Kate, from ICOM-CC, organizers, partners, participants, and everyone for making this conference a valuable platform for knowledge sharing, because we need it. As said before, my name is Medea Ekner. I'm the Director General of ICOM, the International Council of Museums. As part of ICOM, ICOM-CC is the largest of the international committees of our organization, with 5,000 members worldwide from the museum and conservation sector, which is great. For those of you who are not yet familiar with ICOM, in short, ICOM is the global voice of museums, and of course, we relate to this important role with a great sense of responsibility. So we are the world's leading organization for museum professionals, representing over 60,000 members across 130 countries and territories. This includes approximately 5,000 museums. Well, we unite the global museum community through shared values, standards, and a commitment to cultural heritage, as we all share in this conference today. Since 1946, ICOM has supported museums in serving society, preserving, interpreting, and transmitting cultural heritage for future generations. We are well grounded in our mission, in ethics, for public benefit, and the safeguarding of cultural and natural diversity. We develop the professional standards that shape the museum sector, including the ICOM Code of Ethics, a benchmark for responsible practice in museums, and which are adopted internationally. This framework guides museums in areas such as conservation, governance, sustainability, and community engagement. We do have 34 international committees or scientific committees, such as ICOM-CC, bringing together leading experts in every field of the museum sector. And through research, knowledge exchange, and professional networking, these 34 committees drive innovation and promote the best practices globally. Well, resilience is not just a theme for this conference, it's a core mission for the ICOM strategic vision and, of course, the daily operations as well. We work to strengthen museums' capacity to adapt, to respond to crisis, to build long-term sustainability in the middle of climate pressures, social change, and geopolitical instability. We do play a vital role in international advocacy, such as the G20 and COP, where meeting and advocating for partners, protect heritage, and of course, promote the value of museums in and for society. From combating illicit trafficking to shaping cultural policy, our advocacy ensures that museums are heard at the highest level possible. Altogether, ICOM is a global home for museum professionals. And of course, we definitely embodied our slogan, museums have no borders, we have a network. To conferences, trainings, international collaborations, and our worldwide network, we do help museums to meet, to learn from each other, and to build a more resilient, ethical, and innovative sector. We are deeply involved in international efforts to protect cultural heritage during crisis, collaborating with organizations such as Blue Shield and actually ELIF as well, to safeguard museums and cultural property from armed conflicts, natural disasters, and many other type of emergencies. In response to evolving threats, we partner with Interpol to enhance museum security and work to integrate cutting-edge technologies such as artificial intelligence to streamline operations and ensure museums can adapt to modern challenges, and more about this later on. About the Blue Shield, ICOM is one of the founding four members of the Blue Shield International Organization. Together with ICA, ICOMOS, and IFLA, we formed the founding force and are obviously represented in the board of the Blue Shield, which is, for those of you who might not know, but probably everybody does, Blue Shield is a network of national committees and dedicated individuals across the world who are committed to protect the world cultural property, especially under crisis. While Blue Shield is concerned with the protection of cultural, natural heritage, tangible and intangible, in the event of armed conflict and all kinds of human and natural-made disaster. We do actively participating in the implementation of the Blue Shield programs as a founding member, and we do what we can to connect whoever we need to connect among our members and experts that are connected to both Blue Shield and ICOM. Obviously, when something happens which needs special attention in the public space, we do publish statements, both ICOM and Blue Shield, and each of our organizations, and sometimes together, to underline the obligations under international humanitarian law and we do emphasize the responsibilities of all parties under the 1954 Hague Convention and its protocols. So ICOM is committed to the protection of the world's cultural property, and as you might already understand, I'm not on the specialist level, as we heard before, but more on a strategic level. Although this is not a presentation with the images, you have to look at me. Maybe it's not perfect, but it's good enough for this talk. I will talk about ideas and what we are doing on a more strategic and collaborative level. What we do within ICOM is that we continuously monitor emergencies and their impact on museums and museum professionals. This might involve following events as they unfold, assessing damage, and most importantly, to staying closely connected to the people on site within our network to understand the real-time situation on the ground while it's going on. So by reaching out to ICOM members and our national and international committees, we gain an understanding of the specific threats and challenges that museums are facing in a given situation. The better informed we are, the more effectively we can advocate for our members and raise awareness about the difficulties they are encountering, and the more we can mobilize internally with our national committees and international committees. So maintaining a really close contact with our network allows us to understand the immediate needs of museums and their staff during crisis. And often what is mostly needed is expert guidance, technical support, and materials for emergency conservation or evacuation. So thanks to the extensive network of ICOM's experts, we have been able to respond to many of these requests with support from the international committees, such as ICOM Conservation and the national committees. The collaboration in between the national committees are often massive and very active, and they reach directly to those who are in need. So as at a time when global challenges are reshaping our worlds, museums find themselves at crossroads. We face both new and persistent risks, but also unprecedented opportunities to reaffirm the roles as stewards of memory, community anchors, and agents of positive change. Discussions about the vulnerability of museums as institutions are more and more arising, as far as I understand, and these vulnerabilities stream often from current financial constraints, such as budget costs and rising operational costs, which are quite challenging for museums of all sizes, who are obviously have the mission to protect cultural heritage. And today, cultural heritage faces unprecedented trends: armed conflicts, political instability, natural disasters, and continuous expansion of the global art market creates conditions to facilitate illicit trafficking of cultural goods. These are all factors that combined accelerate already existing risks. Weakened institutions, disrupted security systems, population displacement, and many other factors that are ideal conditions for trafficking of cultural property. The ICOM red lists play a crucial role in addressing these issues by providing immediate, accessible, and internationally recognized reference materials. They assist frontline responders directly, from custom officials to peacemakers, so to speak, in identifying at-risk categories of cultural objects highly vulnerable for illicit export, trade, and trafficking. The ICOM Red List can guide critical decisions, including what to document first, what to secure, what to monitor within the market during or after the crisis. In emergency situations, having standardized tools already integrated into workflows ensures continuity, even when staff, infrastructure, or communication systems are compromised. So these tools support recovery by providing a baseline for identifying objects that may have been displaced or looted during an emergency. And partnerships among museums, customs, and police and international organizations become more effective when they operate from shared tools and a common vocabulary. So ensuring the continuity of tools like the Red List during emergencies are not only a technical necessity, it's also an ethical commitment to safeguard heritage together. So by anchoring emergency actions to established tools, ICOM ensures that cultural heritage protection remains coherent, coordinated, and resilient, even under the most challenging circumstances. Regarding museum security, in October, as you know, the Louvre Museum experienced a major theft, highlighting that's not only cultural institutions are targeted by theft. Museums all over the place are subjected to this crime as well. Well, the Louvre opens the door for the discussion, and obviously is a hot topic today, but it's not the only museum who are subjected to this kind of crimes. It's ongoing and occurs currently, and some of the other famous cases can be found in the United States, Syria, and Switzerland, Norway, all over the place. So this recent crime opens the door for renewing the discussion about museum security. There is an alarming increase of such crimes, and the need of increasing security measures in these institutions are definitely a subject for discussion and immediate actions. So it's important to recognize that security measures of collections are an obligation and a major challenge for museums. And because of this, and as a response to not only the Louvre, but increasing theft within museums, to meet these challenges, we initiated a joint operation with Interpol. And this is a quite new initiative, which is and will be developed from now on and during 2026. So if you're a museum here represented and a member of ICOM, we will probably reach out to you for a survey to understand the scope of the problem among our members. So we do this together with Interpol to support museums worldwide in strengthening their museum, the security systems, and to enhance the collective efforts to prevent theft and the illicit movement of cultural goods. Regarding museum collections and artificial intelligence, we do have a collaboration with UNESCO at this point to examine resilience in relation to resources and long-term stability and long-term sustainability with support of artificial intelligence in conservation efforts. AI is already contributing to automated documentation, condition mapping, risk modeling, and even digital restoration. These are significant areas that lower costs in the future and probably enhance efficiency. For museums dealing with limited resources and if in the need of post-crisis recovery or in increasing operational pressure, AI represents more than just an innovation. It also entails strategic prioritization, resource optimization, and smarter ways of working. Hopefully, and with that comes obviously also ethical guidelines and responsibility, which ICOM is now uncovering, so to speak, together with UNESCO now and during the next year. Looking ahead, the future of heritage protection faces significant challenges and opportunities shaped by many of the global trends ongoing at this point or upcoming. Non-governmental organizations such as ICOM are gaining influence in global governance, and as younger generations push forward for environmental reforms and as they demand greater accountability from these institutions such as ICOM, and we have to change and adapt to these requirements. Key factors such as climate change, technological advancements, and geopolitical instability that we are facing at this point, they are in fact reshaping the world, raising risks to heritage, and it highlights the need of preparedness more and more. And as we are getting more and more hyper-connected, museums might face both new opportunities and risks, requiring a more integrated, accountable, and collaborative approach to safeguarding cultural heritage. And all in all, collaborations across borders is essential between states and nations, as well as between institutions, international organizations, and intergovernmental organizations to examine, build knowledge, and establish policies and implement transformational actions to address global challenges together. And this is something that ICOM is focusing on more and more on board. So in this way, all these bodies, international bodies, can share resources in partnerships together. We do all have the same mission. So we play a crucial role on the global stage, as we have the capacity to advocate for the global museum and heritage community at an international level and on national levels at the same time. And also, we engage with museum institutions directly and their audiences worldwide. So we kind of connect people on the ground anywhere in the world through the institutions and national levels to the international and global levels. So in this way, we have the potential to test and implement new methodologies and to lead transformation and behavioral change towards a more resilient future we want. So before I end my talk, ICOM-CC organizes conferences every 3 years. to bring together professionals from all over the world in the interest of conservation. And the next conference is in Norway in September 2026. And as I understand, the call for papers are open. So with this, I wish good luck with the planning and preparations for the next triennial of ICOM-CC. And I wish you all the success for today's sessions. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Medea. That was wonderful. And it was very interesting to hear sort of your perspective on some of the new museum security things that are happening with Interpol. I'd like to invite Elke back to the stage for a little Q&A. And please, folks in the audience, keep sending us your questions. We have a healthy number flowing in, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. I'd like to start us off. This question's for you, Elke. What strategies have proven the most effective in ensuring the long-term resilience beyond the sort of immediate emergency funding?
I think, I mean, it's an extremely broad question to answer in 10 seconds, but something that for me has always been important is to make sure that there's no big gap between first aid response, emergency response, and your longer term recovery efforts. So if I think about Haiti, where we work with the Smithsonian, you rescue stuff from underneath the rubble, you put it in temporary storage, which is not great conditions. Then you need to very quickly get a longer term grant so that these things can be restored and moved into proper shelters. If you wait too long, your first aid measures were almost unnecessary because you'll lose the stuff that you've rescued. So for me, an important aspect that I've been trying to focus on a lot is to make sure that you don't just do first aid and then kind of wait 3 years until you get funding for the next stage.
Absolutely. I think that's something that we all kind of face is the momentum and the energy and the initial response is there, but continuing that on to bring the full circle of things back to sort of normal operational status is challenging. This next question for you, Medea. The ICOM Code of Ethics is currently under review, and the folks in the audience would like to know if there are going to be more, if you anticipate there are going to be more aspects of sustainability and resilience included in the view of those sort of global challenges.
So, certainly, the updated and revised Code of Ethics will address the challenges that are current challenges and anticipated challenges for the future. So we will see an upgrade on this sense as well. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Elke, you talked a little bit about what are some of the more desirable, like what are things that you look for when you were reviewing applications? And one of the questions that our audience had was, what are the sort of the red flags? What are the things that when you see are not sort of desirable or almost you want to avoid so that our participants know, all right, we're putting these proposals together. Let's make sure we are not doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I think as projects, I mean, the big red flags are, of course, those who don't meet the criteria, where you see people didn't even read the guidelines or which are completely out of scope, which are not complete. Some things might take a bit more time, but then, like, for instance, you might need government authorization, and sometimes that takes a while. Then at least indicate that it's in the process. Don't just leave stuff empty and submit. Where you don't explain or don't prove what you're trying. My museum was heavily damaged in a flood, and then there's 0 pictures and there's 0 proof that it actually got damaged. Like, try to justify, because I think you always have to assume that the people who are reading it are dealing with a global set of proposals, and we don't necessarily know exactly what happened to your building. So those I think are some red flags. And then the ones with terrible budgets who just put a round figure for something. I think that is by far the biggest red flag. Just like a total figure and then no further details. And that does happen much more often than you would think.
Yeah, I'm curious, I can see the psychology there. I'm putting forth the time and effort to submit a proposal, so I might as well ask for as much as I can ask for. But that's got to be a tough thing to reconcile.
I mean, I understand if you can get 100,000 that you want to get 100,000, but as on the donor side, of course, you have to try to do as much as possible with the money that you have. So if a project, the core of the project, the essence of it can really be done for 60,000, and the other 40 were just fluff that was added, another conference here, and let's make another booklet there, and 5 more folders here because I have the money anyway, then I especially when you work in emergencies, that extra 40,000 I can use to help another museum in another emergency. So I think that's the part I realized being on the donor side. You look at it very differently, and with your 60,000, you can perfectly do your project, and you probably have as much benefit as you need because a lot of this fluff, it doesn't pay off. Like you don't increase your staff budgets, your finance team, your admin team, your communication team has to work a lot more, and all just to produce 2 extra folders, which might not be what you really want to do. So yeah, I do understand the psychology. The donor has the psychology.
Yeah, that's super helpful, and just really drilling down to what is most impactful and hearing from the donor side what they're thinking. Medea, what crisis, environmental, geopolitical, social, etc., does ICOM identify as being the most urgent crisis to address in this coming 2026 cycle?
All kinds of crises, but as I mentioned, the geopolitical crises are emerging. As I mentioned, cultural property and objects are more and more increasing on the illegal market, which is hugely concerning for ICOM and occupies us a lot. We do have museums who are shutting down in certain places of the world, unfortunately, which means that these museums will not be able to take the responsibility and the obligation for the safeguarding of the cultural heritage locally or regionally or nationally. That is a huge problem, obviously. Something that I'm not sure if it's connected completely to the theme of the topic, but we do know about threats towards politicians and individuals in the public space. I think I see an increased attack on international organizations from diverse groups and communities and associations or even individuals that are threatening organizations to take them to court if they don't meet certain demands, which sometimes are outside of the scope of their mission. But it doesn't matter because it's just a part of kind of a warfare of dismantling and destabilizing organizations, international organizations, by reputation destruction, for example, and brand destruction, which also hinders them probably and possibly to take the responsibility for the core missions they have. In this case, protect cultural heritage and safeguard cultural heritage. So when international organizations are under threat, they have to shift focus to protect them from protecting cultural heritage and the environment to protecting themselves. And if we are not aware of this situation, we will not be able to adapt. And all of a sudden, we are using resources to self-protection instead of protecting the environment. So I think that's something we don't speak about too much just yet, but it's here. If to say something positive in this matter, because we do speak about resources, the ICOM Secretariat has budgeted for our emergency response fund for 2026, which are not marked for any special project. We do not have open calls, but we have members, our international committees and national committees and museums who could propose collaboration between themselves and propose a project supported by the Secretariat. So this is actually something that I would like to address here because it's a possibility for you all to think about and to address all the things that I have mentioned here for any projects that could support museums and the protection of cultural heritage somewhere in the world at this point that needs it. So please think about it and connect to each other, museum to museums, and from museum to the national committees, from the national committees to the international committees and scientific committees, and make a proposal. It's not a lot of money, but we do have some to spare. So thank you for this.
Thanks, Medea. That's great. That's really exciting opportunity, and I look forward to hearing more about it as it sort of rolls out. I'm afraid that's all the time we have actually for the Q&A. That went so quick, but thank you both so much for sharing your time and your experiences with us. It's been really great chatting with you. And if you're able to join us at the end of the day for the Meet the Speakers, I'm sure the audience would love to ask you some more questions. I know you both are super busy, but thank you for now, and we both have a great rest of your day, evening, wherever you are in the world.
Thank you. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to shift us now to our next session. We have a dialogue with Jose Luis Perdozzoli Jr. and Henry McGee. I'd like to invite them both to turn on their cameras. Hi, Jose. And I think Henry, there you are, Henry. Great. So I'll just introduce you both, and then I think I'll hand it off to Jose. Are you going to kick us off? Does that sound right?
Yes.
Awesome.
Pleasure.
Okay. So Jose has a background in polychemistry with a focus on paper-based heritage conservation. He has carried out extensive international work on risk management for cultural heritage and currently manages the ICOM Strategic Planning Unit. Jose is going to talk to us today about resilient collections, relevance, foresight, and cross-sectoral collaboration.
Thank you. Yes, thanks, Melissa, for the introduction. And hello, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking ICOM-CC and the other organizers for this opportunity to participate in this conversation with you all on routes to resilience with a focus on conservation. So allow me to share my screen. There we go. So my contribution today would be to share with you a path to resilience for collections and collections-based organizations, in which I have identified a number of components or steps. It's actually a loop, but I'm going to go through them, and also for each one of them, or for most of them, I will share with you concrete examples of how ICOM is approaching very practically these issues with actions and tools that are available for all. As an intergovernmental organization that now works for 139 member states around the world, with the mission to protect and promote all forms of cultural heritage, including, of course, collections and museums. So it's part of our mandate, to serve member states through capacity building, also providing tools and carrying out research. So let's start with this. As I said, it's one pathway to resilience. And I'd like to start in the availability of collections. So in order to be resilient, I think the first thing is collections should be there, they should exist. They should be in good shape. So really more specifically, we can refer to the state of conservation of the collection. So good shape for use. And they also should be accessible. think that's a key component there. So that collections are there, they are in good shape, they are well kept, they are accessible. I think that's the foundation, for organizations that base their core activities around collections to enhance their resilience. Moving forward from availability, we have adaptability, and this refers to the ability of these organizations to anticipate change and to adapt to future changes, to kind of be open-minded about what can happen in the future, but using structured ways and powerful tools to approach that, so that by engaging with different possible futures, we can prepare ourselves better and therefore enhance our adaptability, not to change to conditions in the external environment, adapt to shocks, etc. So I think adaptability is another key step in this pathway to resilience. Next, we move to activation. And here, I think the main point is to really be aware and proactively unlock the full potential of heritage collections, both as local and global assets to support the communities they serve, to support their communities online, local communities of interest, all kinds. So it's very important in this path of resilience. Once the collections are available, they are adaptable, but they also be activated. So they are their full potential is unlocked, so that they are used to the best of their capacity to support communities. I think that's very important also. They are relevant, they remain relevant. I think here we are talking a little bit also about relevance. And as a result of that, once they are activated and they are fully serving their communities, that comes recognition. And I think recognition is important from the communities that collections serve, but also from players across different sectors, from policymakers and beyond. And here I think it's important to make an effort to engage with other stakeholders beyond our sector. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. And then as a result of that comes support. If they are meaningful, they are relevant, they are recognized, naturally we hope there will be support, political, financial, social, and beyond. And that support feeds back into conservation. So it's a kind of a cyclic path to resilience. Let me now try to illustrate some of the things ICOM are doing to some of these components here. Under availability, as I said, the very ability of collections to continue to exist and to sustain themselves over time. One key aspect that we believe is relevant here is the topic of risk management to collections in a way that is comprehensive, that it takes into account all possible hazards, and that it also helps prioritize and very practically implement risk treatment actions to reduce risk to collection and make sure they are sustained over time with the minimal loss of value possible. It's not possible to sustain everything without losing. So like conserve forever is a utopia, but through managing risk, so we are able to prioritize and sustain the value of these collections over time. And here ICOM has, since 2016, launched a guide to risk management. I'm sharing also all the links to these resources, and it's based on the one international standard for risk management, the ISO 31000, with the different steps that you can see here on screen. Another aspect of availability is the physical access to collections. As you know, over 60% of all museums in the world, they have big problems in their storage. Collections are often not very accessible in storage. So one approach that ICOM has adopted was to create a methodology called REORG, that you can see here on the right, to reorganize collections in stores. It's a very structured, step-by-step, very practical methodology, so that you gain access, you regain control and regain access to your collections in storage. And as they are more accessible, so they are available, so it's easier. I mean, it's better conditions to use the collections and to kind of leverage these collections in storage so that they also remain relevant. Moving on now to adaptability, as I said, it would be the idea to anticipate possible futures, possible changes, and be prepared to adapt to them. So to that aspect, ICOM has conducted what is called a horizon scan study in 2021 by looking at possible change or drivers of change across different dimensions that you can see here in the middle. So we looked at possible changes in societal aspects, technological, environmental, economic, and political, with a time horizon of 2035, so years ahead. What are the big trends? What are the drivers of change? What can happen in the future? And there are very well structured ways and methodologies to do so. One of them is called strategic foresight, that ICOM has been promoting also for the heritage sector. Here's a publication on the right, so the link is there at the bottom. And by engaging with these trends and discussing them and kind of anticipating these futures, we can realize what can be done now to adapt, to be prepared, and even to try and change things in the organization, in the way they work, in their environment, so that we are better prepared. So it's a kind of anticipatory method. And as a result of that, ICOM has produced this set of drivers cards. And I'm showing here examples on the economic driver, but there are all the other dimensions as well. So the link to the driver cards is here, and I invite everyone to go there and to have a look and hopefully use this card just to share two examples with you under the economic dimension. So what can happen in the future? What is possible? What is the trend? What can be drivers that make things different into the future? Just to share these two examples with you. One would be outcome accountability. And there's an explanation here in the card for each driver. So in this one, the explanation of the description is that driven by competition for public and private funds and a greater focus on transparency and accountability, there's going to be a growing demand for organizations to provide evidence on the effectiveness and on the impact of their activities. So evidence impact is likely to become very important, more important. How might this impact heritage? So here you have some questions in the bottom half of the card. So
hey,
what
Jose,
challenge?
1 minute, please.
Yes, thank you. What challenge my organizations anticipate, how they might refocus their outcome accountability. And so it's a rich tool for debate, but also for planning and for preparing, and the same for the shrinking workforce. Moving on to activation. In 2020, ICOM launched the initiative called Our Collections Matter, whose goal was to empower museums and other organizations that work with collections to concretely connect their work with the Sustainable Development Goals across environmental, social, and economic aspects. So here you see two of our online toolkits, and the URL, so the web address is there. So we have on the left a toolkit with over 600 practical tools from the heritage sector and beyond that can help you develop a number of activities and also measure activities that connect concretely the work with collections and the Sustainable Development Goals. And on the right, we have the self-assessment tool, which you could use to have a snapshot of how your organization, your museum, for instance, is currently contributing to sustainable development and the SDGs, and where there's room to make improvements and to strengthen what you're doing. By doing that, by aligning our work with the Sustainable Development Goals, we are also activating our collections. ICOM has also been working on an European funded project to use collections for lifelong learning and education with a focus on youth and children, and as a way also to activate collections. And lastly, I want to share, this is between activation and recognition, very important. we need to talk to other sectors. We should not remain in our heritage bubble. We have to engage with other sectors. And as an effort to launch or to strengthen this dialogue, this intersector dialogue, we recently did an online virtual conference where we had participants from the development sector, from human rights sector, from the environmental sector, from food security, economic development, academia, philosophers, funders. So that was a very rich, and I think that's critical for resilience, that we engage with other sectors. That will also help us enhance recognition and then support as I come back here to the path. And I'm sorry if I took too long, but this is what I wanted to share with you for this conversation today. Thank you.
That was perfect. Thanks, Jose. Henry, I'll just go ahead and introduce you if you want to pull up your PowerPoint while I do that. Thanks for joining us. Henry has a background as an ecologist, a museum curator, and a manager. He runs the consultancy Curating Tomorrow, which aims to empower museums and similar institutions to contribute to a range of sustainable development agendas with forward-looking approaches. Henry's talk is on resilience building as a core part of sustainable development. Thanks, Henry, and your presentation looks great.
Okay, thanks, Melissa, and thanks for the opportunity to be here with you today. So I thought I would share some thoughts on the relationship between resilience building and sustainable development. Resilience and sustainability are words that are very commonly used, we could say, and often kind of overused, and sometimes they can become a bit kind of emptied of meaning. But when we talk about resilience building and sustainable development, we see that resilience and sustainability, they're not like a kind of paint color. They're about action. They're about doing things that strengthen our abilities and reduce the vulnerabilities and risks. So if we can think about resilience building as being about how we increase our individual and our collective options, abilities, and choices to meet the circumstances that we face in the world. And I'll talk very much directly and indirectly in relation to the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals, which I use very much. Because we should see that this is the main international program for sustainable development, but is also a tool for resilience building because it brings together the many different environmental and human rights agreements that have already been made, but that unfortunately people and organizations often don't know about. And it brings them together into one relatively simple framework. And just to respond to a point that was made earlier about which of these crises are more important, unfortunately, we can't really put crises in order. We can't really separate environmental crises from human rights crises because they are the same thing. It's also quite common to think of natural disasters as if they are different from things caused by people or governments or countries. But when we work with risk reduction, we say there's no such thing as a natural disaster. Disasters are the failure of human systems, human and political systems, to meet with events. So we may have natural hazards, but there is no such thing as a natural disaster. And I just explain as well that, I work as a consultant with this idea of curating tomorrow. Well, three ideas really, that the future doesn't just happen by accident. We make it either by design or by not doing things. That the museum-based skill of selection, attention to detail, curation has a relevance in the world. And also that museums and collections and all the many things that we can do with them can play a part in sustainable development and risk reduction. So while Jose was talking, I threw in a couple of extra slides just in response to some of the things I heard and just some ideas I think that are relevant. This is a great quote from John Shar, that the future is not a result of choices among alternative paths offered by the present, but it's a place that's created first in the mind and created next in activity. The future is not some place we are going, but one that we are creating. The paths are not to be found, but made. And the activity of making them changes both the maker and the destination. And I love this quote because I think it's very relevant that we shouldn't just think that the future, that the options already exist. Some of the possibilities may be obvious to us, more or less obvious, but if we work with a particular kind of rigid idea of what the future is going to be like, it's not going to be a great surprise that that's the one that we end up in. So we want different futures. Sometimes we need to think a bit differently. And also in response to what Jose was talking about, I heard something that was resonated very much with how we think of with sustainable development. We use this thing called the human rights-based approach about the availability of opportunities, how accessible those opportunities are, how acceptable they are to the people involved, and to make sure that they're good quality. We call this the AAA-Q framework, 3 A's and a Q. And we can apply this in many situations, including in museums and collections and the roles that we play in the world. And so I'm going to talk about some practical opportunities for resilience building that many of you maybe are already doing, and if not, are easy to take part in. So the main international local opportunity for disaster risk reduction is called Making Cities Resilient. There are thousands of cities around the world already taking part in this. It contributes directly to the Sustainable Development Goals. I put some of the targets there. So many of you will be in cities that are already partners in making cities resilient. But I wonder how many of those cities have really considered the culture and heritage and the resources, how they need to be protected and how they can be mobilized to face current and future risk. For instance, when the Making Cities Resilient was put together, culture and heritage were, I have to be honest, a little bit left out. So afterwards they made this thing called the Disaster Resilience Scorecard for cities with a kind of appendix on cultural heritage, which is really, really good. It aims to make sure that culture and heritage are protected and also mobilized. So I really encourage you to have a look at this. And Making Cities Resilient uses a framework of 10 essentials for resilience. I love a good framework. So what I did was take that framework and think, how can museums and similar institutions use this? The 10 essentials are to get organized, work with partners, to understand current and future scenarios, to budget for resilience, which just means that you don't use money just on short-term activities, and also that you make sure that essential functions are budgeted for. Relying on project-based funding for essential functions is not a route to success. Promoting resilient urban design, urban development, protecting nature, building our institutional capacity, staff training, building public skills, something education, awareness and skills that museums can obviously do, increasing our infrastructure resilience, speaks to the work to conserve collections. Then we come to how we face crises, making sure that we are prepared, and then making sure that we can recover and build back better. Unfortunately, museums often think of crises, situations after they have happened. And unfortunately, we often find ourselves back to the start where, let's be honest, there's a flood in the basement, collections get flooded, we deal with the flood, then we put the collection back in the room that flooded, and then it happens again. So we haven't learned very much. So we need to try to do things a bit differently. And these are the resources I talk about are all free. They're all open access and waiting for you to use. But then I did a thing called the Churchill Fellowship, which is a funding scheme that supports people to travel, to basically to collect good ideas and try and put them together. And so I tried to look at how we can bring sustainable development, disaster risk reduction, and environmental protection together. And so I spent a month traveling around Japan, a country which faces many hazards, still manages to be a very successful country. How does it do this? So we can see that there is a kind of a culture of preparedness, a culture of risk reduction. It's called Bozai in Japan. There are programs on the television about Bozai, about risk reduction. And you can read about these in this report I did called Museums for Better Futures. And in that, I put together some ideas to say that environmental protection and restoration and supporting human rights, they're really the two pillars, action tracks, goals of action for sustainable development, how we build a better future.
1 minute, Henry.
Thank you. Sustainable development is about the wider world, not just how we use resources in an institution. There are lots of invitations to take part and international perspectives that we can draw on. We shouldn't fall into the rather comfortable trap of thinking that history and heritage are only good things for sustainable development. They can also cause lots of problems if we don't use them properly. Every country and every community faces risk to different degrees, but risk-informed approaches help us to plan and cope with risk. So not just to survive, but to thrive. There is no such thing as a natural disaster, as I mentioned. And reducing risk is very, very much better than dealing with the problem after it has happened. If we just think we'll deal with things after they happen, we're often too late, unfortunately. So we can also say that learning the lessons of past events is crucial, but it can be difficult, especially when we can't really imagine them. But working with the future in mind always helps to support strong sustainable development action. Disasters tend to share common features, and there is a process. Let's say recovering is maybe not the right word, because what recovery looks like is often quite difficult. But while recovery often focuses on the hard solutions, buildings and infrastructure, that the social infrastructure of relationships, identities and trust are more difficult to build or to maintain. Museums and libraries too can play very many roles at all stages of disaster risk reduction, before, during and after events. The take-home message is that we have the tools and the frameworks, so let's use them. Otherwise, it doesn't make good sense. And these are just my details. You can look up any of the resources I've talked about today. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks, Henry. I have to admit, I wrote down, I pulled out a quote from what you just shared, and I also love a good framework. And I think that was what's so cool about what you and Jose just presented to us, is you gave us a couple of different frameworks in which to think about this work and how we're moving towards a more resilient future. Jose, would you come back online? And I think we have time for maybe one dialogue question. I did let you both read on because you guys were sharing such really interesting stuff. So I'm just going to cut to the chase, because I think what we would all like to hear, after hearing, sort of the processes and the thoughts and the strategies behind what you guys shared, how do you apply these frameworks in a very practical sense? What do you recommend to our audience in their work days or longer term, how they should be applying these methodologies?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to start. I mean, my suggestion would be to look at the work that you're already doing and look at how the framework can be connected to that. Because we're already doing a lot of this stuff without realizing it. We don't have the language or the skills or the terminology. So look at trying to apply it to our existing work and realize that we're not trying to get people to start something. We're helping them to go faster and further.
Okay, so if I can continue, I'm just going through some of the frameworks I share under availability. So if you've never done risk management for collections, so we have a very practical manual And I think practically it's a matter of creating a small group in your organization and going through the steps and see what's already in place, making the links, and then thinking about risk. No, I think it's important to recognize the words uncertain. So we have to embrace uncertainty. And there's the whole methodology. So small teams for instance, for risk management, for reorganizing the storage. If you have issues with storage and poor accessibility, very practical tools there. For activating the collections, I think as Henry was saying, again, reflect on how the work with collections is already contributing to sustainable development. So we have some tools for that. Let's just take the time. Is make some time with the group in your organization to sit down, go through these tools. It's not more work. Sometimes it's perceived as extra work. It's a different way of approaching our work for kind of managing risks, for reorganizing the storage, for connecting the work we do with collections and the sustainable development goals, and also to talk about possible futures. If you take the driver's card, just do like a one afternoon session with the team. Sit down and pick up a driver. How would this impact our organization? Pick another driver. How these two combined would impact? What can we do about it? Can we do anything now? Should we prepare something? So it's basically teamwork, keep it practical, and a mindset. I think that is not kind of additional work, but it's a different way, it's a better way to do our work.
Thank you. And I can't agree more. And, arguably, doing this work now is saving you lots of work in the future. They always say, what is the quote? It's like a Benjamin Franklin quote, an ounce of prevention equals a pound of cure. And the same goes for, $1 invested into preventative measures. It saves you $7 in recovery efforts in the long run, and, multiply that by X, Y, and Z.
Can I quickly react to that, Melissa? One thing I want to say, we oftentimes we're very much focused on the prevention and conservation, which is, of course, is fundamental. No, it's like the foundation. But I would like to encourage everyone to also think about the activation part. So how are these collections we conserve are being used? Can their full potential, can they do more in terms of climate education, in terms of fostering social cohesion? You do an exhibition about gender equality. There's huge potential there. We tend to focus on the kind of conservation part, which is our job, and of course it's critical, underpins everything. But I would like to encourage everyone to really take some time and reflect on these collections we conserve. How are they being activated towards the communities they are aimed to serve, and can they be better activated? I'm sure there's a huge potential there to do much more, and conservation underpins everything. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you both. I'll call you back in a few minutes for the Q&A from the audience. But for now, we're going to switch over to our second dialogue. And I'd like to invite Young Hee-sung, Catherine Snell, and Aisha Hendricks to come join me and turn on your cameras. Hello, hello. I'll just go ahead and read your introductions, and then I'll hand it over to Young Hee-sung to kick us off. Sound good?
Yeah.
So, Young Hee-sung is a multidisciplinary artist and curator based in Toronto, and the founding director of Laird Art Gallery, formerly the director of General Affairs for the Korean Artists Society of Canada, and continues to promote art as a means of connection and connective renewal. Go ahead, Young Hee.
Okay. Let me share my slide. Okay. Okay.
Looks
Hello.
great.
Hello, my name is Young-hee Song. I am an artist and the founder and director of Rare Art Gallery in Toronto, Canada. I was invited to this conference because my past has been affected by uncertainty, limited resources, and steady perseverance. Today, I'd like to share how resilience has grown quietly through art and community. This is the inside of our gallery. This is our building with our home upstairs and the gallery downstairs. During the pandemic, our suburban rent steadily increased. And just before the pandemic ended, we found this place and moved into Toronto. Eventually, we transformed this neglected space into a small functional gallery and home. I made this little garden alone, laying stones and planting seeds and trees. And it unexpectedly received the recognition from the Reside Garden Society. Today, I will speak about two intertwined paths, how I supported the local artists and how I supported myself as an artist with limited resources. My counseling studies and art therapy thesis opened the healing direction in my peace practice. And this working naturally connected me with the local nonprofits offering healing-focused art programs. Our gallery hosts a few different art classes for seniors by partnering with the nonprofit organizations, and I shared some of those classes with other local artists. For instance, I invited Yu Young Kim to lead the Asian Brucey painting class. And for the smartphone photography class, I invited Kyungmin Lee to teach. Our gallery has worked closely with the Korean Artist Society of Canada since 2020. We have supported their programs by helping them secure funding. And this exhibition is one example of the ongoing collaboration. We assisted with the grants and online art programs for seniors during the pandemic. I served as general affairs at KASC and started a new artist talk program, which began at my gallery and continued as a monthly gathering. Artist Tae Wook Yeol passed away earlier this year. He joined the KASC in 2022. After moving from a career in animation to his own art practice, and I felt a deep empathy for his late start. I visited his studio, encouraged his work, and supported him by inviting him to a group exhibition at our gallery. Here is the obituary we prepared as a community to remember him and honor his contribution. We also worked on a range of community activities and events, not just the healing art classes, but many different creative sessions as well. Here is a summary of our support for local artists and our key contributions to the local artist community. Now I will share how I sustained my own practice during those unstable years. Before moving to Toronto, I lived in Ajax, Ontario, where I continued creating and teaching. During that time, I was invited to hold my first solo exhibition at Ajax City Hall. We found an affordable space as the pandemic eased and opened our gallery in early 2022. At the time, I felt isolated as an artist and needed a place to connect with others. That is how the gallery began. My journey began with very limited resources, so I learned to save even the smallest materials. Because acrylic paint dries so quickly, I kept the leftover pieces for years and later turned them into small sculptural works for my 2025 exhibitions. From those dried paint fragments, fragrant, I shape them into small stone-like forms and call them hearts. When people touched them, I would say, "You touched my heart." Buying new paint was financially difficult, so I looked for artist support programs. I applied to Royal Talents, and although their selection had already closed, they still sent me free materials. When I opened the gallery, I need a website. Through a government program called Digital Main Street, I was able to build the entire gallery website at no cost. This is the website I built through that program. These are the posters from my solo exhibitions at Assembly Hall Gallery and Cedar Ridge Creative Center Gallery. Both were supported by the City of Toronto. In this painting, the green light symbolizes faith, a quiet signal to keep moving forward, even on unfamiliar roads. That sense of faith helps me continue my work. This painting was made just before Christmas. I later learned that my mother passed away on that same night. In the midst of loss, it became a night of grace for me, so I titled it O Holy Night. Connection is the painting where my brushstroke dancetism first emerged. I feel the space between the electric pole and their parallel wires with countless strokes, and the process began to feel like a quiet form of communication, prayer, and healing. Brushstroke dancetism can be understood through several key characteristics: the technical communication of countless strokes, a philosophical practice of slowness and contemplation, an aesthetic synthesis of Eastern brushwork and Western abstraction, and the material transformation of discarded paint. It is a labor-intensive yet tranquil process. I often write to sort my thoughts and capture the stories behind my paintings. Those writings became poems, which led me to propose there a link to Richard Scarsbrook. Next year, we will present a group exhibition at Etobicoke Civic Center Gallery called Art Meets World. This liveportraitworld.com, I created this site while preparing a solo exhibition that combined my artworks with the poems I wrote following the Art Meets World concept. My journey has been shaped by scarcity, faith, and emotional challenges. Through slow, patient density, renewal continues to strengthen my resilience. Looking ahead, a few programs are planned, but who knows how things will unfold. I'm simply hopeful for what comes next. Thank you.
Thanks, Young-hee. Don't go too far. We'll have a dialogue with you in a second, but I'd like to invite back Catherine and Aisha for a quick talk about their work with Sanlam. Catherine is the archivist of the financial and insurance company Sanlam in Cape Town, South Africa, and has been with them since 2015, managing the archives and museum. She has also served in leadership positions on museum professional bodies since 2006 and is the current chair of ICOM South Africa. With her today is her colleague Aisha, who has a background in conservation as well as curation. Aisha is the current assistant archivist at Sanlam Archives and Museum. She's also a member of ICOM and the South African Museum Association. All right, take it away.
Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Catherine. Now we can start. So firstly, I will just give an introduction of who Sanlam is and what we do at Sanlam, and also briefly touch on our own conservation work that we are doing here, and then also the landscape, the South African landscape, and what our colleagues are doing with regards to conservation. So firstly, Sanlam is an insurance company. It was registered in 1918 as an insurance company. And then in 1968, the museum or the archives was formed, and in 1982, the museum. Sanlam is one of few, very, very few corporate, the Sanlam archives and the Sanlam Museum. We are one of very, very few corporate museums in South Africa. I think we don't have more than 10 corporate museums in the country. Most of them are government-funded museum or privately owned museum. So what is our role at the archives and the museum? When I started here 10 years ago, not many people was aware of the archives or the museum. So we've started this whole idea that we want to promote the archives so that people can, our colleagues and former colleagues and visitors, potential clients, that they can appreciate the history of Sanlam. So we started with awareness campaigns of us and what we do and why we think we are special. And then also, is to expand on our collections, and also provide a basis for historical and financial research. And when we turned 100 in 2018, the archives was the Google of the company back then. So our goal is to be the central repository of the corporate memory of Sanlam. Sanlam is a big company with thousands of employees, not only in Bellville, Cape Town, but also we have head offices in Johannesburg, and we have a footprint, in more than 40 countries. So, but we want our colleagues to know, listen, there is a place where you can send us your information. And then we want to position the archives not only in Cape Town, but also in South Africa and, of course, internationally. And because, I think it's important for us that our colleagues must be inspired and also be enlightened about the history of this amazing company. And I always say that, all of us, most South Africans know Sanlam as an insurance company, but not many know about the historical significance of this company. And then our functions, of course, we focus on archival records management. When I started here 10 years ago and Aisha joined me 2 years later, we haven't had a database. There was inventory. And also during the time when we were working, on the history, on the centenary, it was a struggle to get information. And after that, I said, no, we can't work like that. So we started a whole process, as to classify or standardize our records. And I must say, we've done a lot. We created a database in collaboration with our IT department. So conservation, preservation is also very important for us. And to preserve, the physical integrity of our records. And of course, because we have a museum, we do a lot of curating, exhibitions, and also just managing the museum and stakeholder engagement. So when I was appointed 10 years ago, I told them, I'm very involved in all these museum associations. If I'm successful, can I, continue? So stakeholder engagement became part of my KPI. And because they also see that as an opportunity, to showcase our history to a different audiences. So our collections, we have, of course, the museum objects, we have a photographic collection, we have in-house journals, the first in-house journals, 1932, newspaper clippings, we have audiovisual material, and of course, a library, we have documents, and Santam is the short-term insurance. They was also registered in 1918, so we have all the annual books and reports, and then with content manager assist application where we have digital information. So highlights of our time here at Sanlam was revamping our museum and also being involved in publications. That was The Power of Your Life. It is one of our publications, and then also a centenary century to celebrate. And then this is just to show the database that we have created with our IT department. There was no proper documentation back then. So we've started this whole process of document our records that I've just shown earlier, a few slides ago. And then the most important thing for us was to, awareness. So these are bit of clips of what we, making people, our colleagues, aware of who we are, what we are doing. And then also we have external awareness program where we are telling our staff, our colleagues, our peers in other museums of also what we're doing with collaborating with them in program, training, workshops, and so on. Aisha will elaborate on that later on. Our ultimate goal was, to make our records accessible. That's why we have the database and also the conservation interventions. And now Aisha will quickly, because I see the time. 10 minutes is very quick.
So as Catherine mentioned, everything that we do in the archives and the museum, we do it with our tagline, or the theme that we keep in mind is working with what you have. So this is what our storage space looked like before. And with the idea of working with what you have, we then transformed it using our cell phones for digitizing, our scanner that we had, and our computer to make our records digital. And then also, this is the condition of some of the records. As you can see, it's the bindings that we use. It's rusted, it's old, causing damage. So we address that by removing it and then using acid-free tissue paper that we could source locally, and also acid-free boxes that we could source locally. So trying to do our best with the materials and resources that we have on hand to make it better and then go from chaos to order. So this is currently what our archives looks like. And we are still continue working on our different collections that we haven't touched on yet. But Catherine will just give you an overview of conservation in South African Museum.
So yes, so we have asked our colleagues, not the entire, not all the museums, because we have more than 400 museums in South Africa. But listen, a few of them, we asked them, so what are you doing? What is the situation look like in your museum? So a number of qualified conservators in South Africa, very, very, very few. Yeah, very, very few. We can actually count it on our fingertips. And then Aisha was very fortunate to study chemistry. So some of us, we didn't study chemistry, but museology, we haven't had that in-depth. And of course, we can't consider ourselves as conservators, but we have done training, basic training and courses. So in South Africa, we don't have only a very, very few people that are conservators. So I've asked our colleagues, so who's responsible for your for the care and the conservation in your museum? So mostly it is the curators, it is collections managers, it is the museum manager, because sometimes in very isolated towns that you will only have a curator or museum manager, so then they will be responsible. And then if you are very fortunate, then in most of your everyone in your institution that works with collections, they will be responsible. So we also ask them, how do you have a budget, a specific budget? Some say yes, others say no. And how often do you buy your conservation material? When needed. So
1 minute, Catherine.
Okay, almost. Thank you. So only how often is when needed. And then number 6, you can read it there. Not all of them make use of it. And then also they also don't consult with local communities. Do you experience any other challenges? Of course, they do experience challenges. And it is mostly because of the lack of expertise in-house and not enough the budget, of course, and adequate funding. So yeah. So this is us, and this is just Sanlam now. I'm coming back to Sanlam. For us, it is important, working at Sanlam is to live our vision and positioning this 100-year-old company as a respectable corporate archive and museum, locally, nationally, and also internationally, because we have a global footprint. Thank you.
Great, thank you both so much. Young Hee, can you join us again for a little dialogue? Great. So I'd like to start with this question. You both kind of talked about this guiding philosophy that you have in your art, Young Hee, and in your sort of working practices, Aisha. And I was hoping that you can maybe elaborate a little bit about how these philosophies have guided sort of your projects and your day-to-day work and helps you work towards resilience. And what about that, I think, has been influential and effective? Young Hee, would you like to start?
Oh, yeah. My guiding philosophy is Protestantism, which I developed through my own practice. I apply it by focusing on the process rather than worrying too much about difficulties. I try to take one small step at a time and let those steps accumulate. When the density becomes full, I always find that a quiet sense of order appears. I trust this pattern and continue without losing hope. This approach helps me work steadily, and it also shapes the way I build a community. Small and sincere actions together over time and create a real connection, collaboration, and resilience. Yeah, that's it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Aisha?
Okay, so an example of how we use the philosophy of working with what you have. So on a day-to-day, for us in South Africa, conservation material is very expensive, so we have to source it overseas. And because of low budgets, that's not possible. So we try to look at other ways to source materials that we can transform and use within the archive space. So an example would be, recently we had a project where we cleaned our silver collection, and we had to use calcium carbonate powder. For some reason, we couldn't find it anywhere, so our next big step was to get white chalk, and we turned it into calcium carbonate powder, precipitated out from a solution, and that's how we could clean our collection. And then because of our years of experience and this philosophy of work with what you have, we thought we can then train our peers and connect with our networks to share this idea so that other people in the museum sector within South Africa can have a bit of hope and innovation to work with their collections as well.
Great, thank you both. I love this idea of sort of small cumulative actions that sort of build to something significant. I'd like to ask now, you both talked about the effect and importance of community and networks in your work, and how it's sort of renewed both for you personally and for you on a profession, and for your organizations in your gallery and for Sanlam, how that's supported sort of resilience at an individual level and sort of an organizational level. And I'm just hoping that you can kind of talk a little bit more about your community and networks and how you've sort of done that work. Young Hee, would you like to start?
My community support has been very essential to my resilience. In Toronto, public galleries recently removed the rental fees for invited artists and even began providing artist fees This support gave me genuine confidence and made a meaningful financial difference. Participating in an alternative art fair in Los Angeles with no participation fee also showed me that cities and institutions truly want artists to grow. It made me feel respected and reminded me that I'm not alone. So, and kind of non-profit groups such as KSC, MFCC, and Arts Academy brought new energy into my practice as well. After many years of painting alone, creating rare art gallery helped me rebuild a sense of connection and support my family. And also my alumni artist group also supported my early steps. Without these networks continuing as a newcomer in Canada would have been much harder. These communities continue to renew my strengths and remind me why I keep doing this work. So ultimately, these communities give me meaningful work, a sense of belonging, reliable connections, emotional stability, hope, financial support, personal growth, and new opportunities.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, all levels, all elements of what it means to be human and what our needs are. Thanks, Young Hee. Catherine, would you like to?
Yes, I would like to add my 5 cents as well. So I've learned very early in my career about the importance of community. I've studied archaeology, and my archaeology professor, the late Hilary Deacon, he always told me, Kathy, if you want to make a difference in the museum and heritage sector, you can't sit on your own island. So he said you have to make connections. People must know who you are when they see and when they hear your name. So this whole idea of you're not an island and that you have to make connections has become one of the building blocks on which I have built my professional career. I will always find ways as to collaborate with people. And so I've been working in the museum and heritage sector for almost 25 years. Next year, it will be 25 years. And over the years, I have learned that there is power in being connected and also being part of a community. So, because networking, it offers opportunities for collaboration. I've done amazing projects in South Africa. I can say really in the entire South Africa. In my previous work, I worked for government, and then they told us, because you are part of national government, you can not only work in your own province, you have to work in the entire South Africa. So I have done the most amazing work in South Africa. And also this network, it gave me the opportunity, like I said, to work with museum and heritage practitioners throughout South Africa. It also helped me with my own professional development, because I've learned so much from so many people. And like you said, I've been serving on these professional boards, the associations. And because of that, I was able to be part of, amongst, decision making within the sector, capacity building, help with training courses, workshops, and things like that. So making connections and being part of a network that really provides direction, for myself, of course. And with all of that, I was able to bring it within my own workspace and share it with my colleagues like Aisha. And also, we always have interns with us. I can share it with them also, and you tell them how important it is to put yourself out there and make connections and being part of a network. And one thing I just want to say, we are working for corporate. So if working for corporate, you feel very isolated, like because there are not many corporate museums. But but when I came here, I already had my network, you know, my people. And because of that, I was able to host 2 conferences in Sanlam, because I want my network also to know the, you know, the history and of this corporate museum. And we are not only about finances and insurances, you know. So yeah, you take your network wherever you want them to be and where you want them to go. And yes, and another thing, what is also important for me, being part of the network, but also being a mentor, you know, for young up and coming museologists or archivists. And where, like I said, we've had so many students with us, you know, and both Aisha and I, we are able to help them as well, you know, paying it forward, and you know, and yeah. So that is my 5 cents.
Thank you for your 5 cents, for all 3 of your 5 cents. I could keep asking you all questions all day, but I will be considerate of our audience and transition us now to the Q&A section. So I'll ask their questions to you. I'd like to call back Tom and Jose, because we'll have questions. I'm sorry, Henry and Jose. Great. Okay, thank you all. We have a ton of questions rolling in. So let's see. This first one is for Jose. How does digitizing collections factor into your concept and framework for availability?
Yes, I think, I mean, first and foremost, it would could enhance access. I think it would make them more widely available. But there are, of course, some considerations. Always there are considerations to take. As once you digitize, you also start to create a digital collection that has to be sustained over time and maintained and be available and with risk management. So there are implications there. But definitely, I think contributes to availability in a way that it grants wider accessibility. Again, I mean, we should also be aware of the digital divides and digital challenge that are there in many parts of the world. So that should be taken into account as well. But in principle, I think it will be a way one way not to contribute to increase the availability.
Great, thank you. This next question is for Young Hee. The audience member says, thanks for presenting your route to resilience on your personal and business level. Would you have suggestions for larger institutions? That's part 1. And part 2 is, how can an artist's perspective and practical influence resilience and sustainability on a larger scale? So what recommendations would you have for larger organizations? And what influence do you think that your methodology of resilience can have on a bigger scale?
Okay, I'm just the artist and independent artist and gallerist. I don't know a lot about big organization, and but yeah, but I as we already told, I really thank you for kind of support by Toronto City and LA Alternative Art Fair, the kind of organization. They don't even get the admission kind of application fee and exhibition fee. That is really helpful for us. So just a little thing make a difference. So if we the professional for work that kind of a big organization, please help us, the poor artists. They always looking for kind of fund, something support, and we feel very lonely. So we are looking for something. We are not alone. If we and most important thing is the kind of exhibition opportunity. That is important. We want to meet other audience, and then we kind of a meeting of them make art grow and complete. I think just working in studio, it's not enough. In my opinion, in my perspective, if we meet audience in exhibition area, and the kind of opportunity make us empower. Yeah, things. So please make this kind of opportunities for us. And next, what about the other question? I forgot the other question.
Oh, I think you answered. It was sort of two of the same questions. It's about like what kind of relationship should, artists and larger institutions have, and how can we collaborate better to support each other and be more resilient. I think you answered that wonderfully. Thank you. This next question is for Catherine and Aisha. What strategies help museums shift the perception that conservation requires specialists and imported materials? And how do you empower staff to work with what they have?
Can you just repeat it, please?
Yes, yeah. What strategies help museums shift the perception that conservation requires specialists and imported materials? How have you sort of empowered staff to move beyond the notion that they need a particular background, particular access to resources, sort of fitting within your philosophy of work with what you have?
Yeah. So I think for and Aisha briefly touched on it, but also dispel this whole idea that conservation, there are easy ways or solutions to work with what you have. And I think what is very important for us as South Africans, we always strive to learn new ways. So there are constant, workshoppings and training that is taking place, and which we always, which our peers always wanted to take part in. So this whole idea of museums or South African museum community, I always said, although we might be like more than 400 museums in South Africa, which might sound too little for some other countries, but it's very small we're very small in our community. So constantly we are finding ways, with workshoppings and with training. So training become very fundamental for us, where we can lead young museum professionals. Aisha, do you want to add something?
And we actually had a training session during this year at one of our conferences, and it was titled Conservation Made Easy. And the theme of it was trying to dispel the idea that conservation is only for specialists. You can only do it if you studied it, you have a degree and the title of conservator. And we were like drilling it into them, this idea of working with what you have. This is your network. This is who you reach out to if you have a problem, if you need some guidance. These resources available. We gave them a handbook with tons of resources. And we actually had 3 or 4 institutions ask us afterwards to give them some training and to assist them. So I think the message is out there, and we are building a bigger network and community and sharing this idea.
Wonderful. Thank you both. And this last question will go to you, Henry, and then we'll have to transition over to coffee break and bathroom break and all that jazz. Henry, you posted John Scar's quote in your presentation. And in view of that quote on creating the future, how can dealing with our current crises be effective in shaping and boosting cultural heritage resilience for the future?
Yeah, so I think the way I would answer that would be to say that society kind of got along fairly well without museums for thousands of years. We've only had museums for the last couple of 100 years. We've only had museum practice for less than 100 years. So we kind of have to see that the practices that we have also developed through the time when, let's face it, the environment was very badly exploited. So if we want a future where people and nature can flourish together, then some of the practices will have to change. And the more that we can be, to mention something that Jose spoke about, that the word change can seem very frightening. I think it's fair to say that a lot of conservators are quite worried about the word change. But when we start to think about words like opportunity and possibility, and we try to do things differently, we create different options. And so I think that would be one way to say it. And another way to say it would be that many of the solutions already exist. They're just not used. And in some ways, the heritage sector, it looks to the really big organizations as if they have the answers. But in some ways, they face the biggest challenges. The ones that are, to be honest, my experience is the ones who are often quite quick to change are the really small ones, often the ones that have very few resources. So when you have few resources, suddenly many more things become possible because that's life. You know, you have to go with the flow. So I think what I'd say is like many of the solutions or the responses already exist. And if we can just get a bit more courage to learn from the small institutions, I think we'll get quite a long way.
That's great. It's very thought-provoking. Thank you, Henry. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions and answers, but a big thank you all, Jose, Henry, Younghee, Aisha, Catherine, for sharing your experience and knowledge with us today. It's been really wonderful chatting with you all. Before we go on break, we do have a quick elevator pitch. Oh, and look at all the claps in the chat. Thanks, everybody. We have a quick elevator pitch from Constanze Furman, who is the head of the Environmental and Cultural Assets Department of the German Federal Environmental Foundation. Go ahead, Constanze.
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much. I'm just sharing my presentation. You just have to tell me what you can see now.
Not seeing anything yet. Oh, wait.
Is it presenter
There we
mode?
are. It is not presenter mode.
Is it now presenter mode?
No.
No. Okay. What can you see now?
We see all of your slides on the left-hand side, and your notes bar.
Oh, okay. That's strange. Maybe you can share the presentation.
Maybe you can just go into presenter mode on your screen.
I did already, so that's why.
Oh, okay.
What can you see now?
Still the same. Maybe reshare?
Yeah, that would be nice.
There we go.
Okay, thank you so much. It just worked when we tested it, so it's kind of confusing. Okay, anyway, so yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this discussion. Over the next few minutes, I would like to outline how climate change is actually reshaping our professional approaches to heritage conservation across museums, collections, historic buildings, and cultural landscapes, and why adaptation and resilience have become central concepts for the future of our field. So next slide. So the starting point is clear. Climate change, we all know that already, affects all fundamental pillars of conservation. It acts as a multidimensional stressor on heritage systems. We are seeing altered patterns of material aging, new dynamics of damage, accelerate biological activity, and shifts in microclimates. And as a result, conservation standards are being pushed to the limits, and this concerns both material and immaterial values. Next slide. So heritage must now be seen as a system that is vulnerable in many different ways, shaped by the interactions between materials, indoor climates, infrastructures, and cultural meaning. And I argue at the same time, this complexity actually shows that we need to think of heritage as a resilient system that can absorb climate stress and adapt to it and reorganize itself. And for that definition, resilience is understood here as a multidimensional concept encompassing objects, ecosystems, institutions, and communities. The next slide. So we are seeing a major shift in thinking. Older preservation models, which were based on stable environmental conditions, are becoming less and less workable. Adaptive conservation, which takes climate variability as a given, is now essential, and this approach actually shifts the focus from keeping heritage actually in a fixed state to managing change in future conditions. And it also requires predictive risk models, flexible intervention methods, and new materials and way of working. The next slide. So within this vulnerability lies significant potential, I think. Heritage sites such as museums, historic buildings, etc., can serve as living labs for climate adaptation and climate education. They offer spaces where ecological, technological, craft-based knowledge converge, for example, through sensors, monitoring for early risk detection, innovative conservation materials, climate adaptive museum environments, or resilient vegetation, water management. So these examples show how heritage can actually become an active knowledge space where resilience can be observed, tested, and modeled. Next slide. Of course, this kind of change also requires the right framework conditions. In Germany, we can be lucky. We have the German Federal Environmental Foundation that has long supported research on topics such as indoor climate management, climate adapted vegetation, digital monitoring, climate risk assessment. And we also now have the German strategy for adaptation to climate change by our government, which for the first time ever actually introduced binding indicators and targets for dealing with climate risk at World Heritage Sites. So that was quite a success. And that actually just means that climate adaptation is no longer just optional, it's also a kind of responsibility for organizations to deal with. Next slide. So what do we need now? Climate adaptation will only succeed if I think research advances rapidly and its results are translated into practice. We could easily define more areas. I just mentioned like 3 areas of development that are becoming quite clear. The first pillar is risk detection monitoring. For example, we need more high precise sensors, integrate climate, environmental and material data in real time, for example, improve modeling for extreme events, for example, but we also need adaptive protection strategies. We already mentioned that in the previous presentations. We need climate resilient vegetation, ecosystem-based approaches when it comes to cooling museum buildings, for example. We also need new indoor climate models, innovative materials, preventive damage reduction, etc. And the last pillar, governments and knowledge, I already touched on that. For example, interdisciplinary networks, binding frameworks, practical knowledge transfer. So these are the three elements that actually show that climate adaptation is a research challenge. It requires new methods and a shared foundation between science, policy, and practice. The last slide. So yeah, heritage is not only something we need to protect, it's also a place where we can learn how to adapt. Heritage should increasingly be recognized as a resilient knowledge space, a place where resilience is visible, innovation can flourish, and society's capacity to face the future is experienced in concrete ways. And yeah, and my key message here is heritage is preserved not in spite of transformation, but also through it. So we have to accept transformation, and that would be my last word. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Constanza. We're about to head into a break, but for anyone who's interested in chatting with Constanza more, I believe you'll be in a breakout room. Is that right? Available to talk? That's fabulous. So if anybody's available and wants to chat and ask some more questions about that really quick but really interesting presentation, Constanza will be around. Feel free to let yourself into the breakout rooms. Hopefully by now you know how to do it, but at the bottom in your toolbar, you should be able to select the rooms. We'll be back starting our next session at 16:50 UTC. And I will see you all then. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. As we're waiting for folks to come back from the break, from the breakout room, getting their new cup of coffee, tea, whatever folks are doing, I wanted to invite you all to take our second Slido poll of the day. And I think you can access, if you don't have it already up, the link in the chat. The second poll for today is, what resources do you use to make your project resilient? And if you can, one word, please. I know that's a challenge. Networks. Networks are a big one, absolutely. Emergency planning, resilient staff, critical thinking, learning, other people, love it. This is great. Thank you all. Well, feel free to keep adding your responses to that poll throughout the rest of the afternoon. It'll be available. I'm going to now switch us to our next session. We have a talk courtesy of Jürgen Vervaas. Jürgen? Oh, great. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining me. Jürgen is the president of the International Institute of Conservation of Historic and Artistic Works, IIC, and has been the head of collections care at the National Archives in the UK since 2016. Jürgen's going to talk to us today about resilience through conservation, leadership, and sustainability. Take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, Melissa. I just start sharing my screen. Give me a sec. That should be coming through now.
Looks great.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to share, some of ISE's and my thoughts on resilience through conservation and leadership in sustainability. But I think before I start kind of elaborating a bit more on this topic, I will briefly introduce ISE. I'm sure many of you will be quite familiar with ISE anyway, and you might be members, hopefully. But hopefully, this provides you with a bit of context of how ISE, I think, quite proactively supports and fosters the idea of resilience through conservation and leadership in sustainability. And, oops, sorry, that was the wrong one. That's okay. ISE was established as a learned society to improve the knowledge, methods, and working practices needed within the conservation profession to protect cultural works for future generations. And the purpose of ISE is based on our 1950 founding principles, and we do this by bringing together conservators and heritage professionals from around the world within a shared and independent arena through educating, enabling, and recognizing excellence. And this commitment drives everything we do. And in our 2030 strategy, we very much focus on developing sustainable leadership and standards, and we're bringing together the world leading expertise of our fellows with emerging professionals. We collaborate with colleagues in our regional groups around the globe. We make knowledge accessible to everyone wherever they are through our publications, congresses, and events. And we support our professional members through our international prizes, grants, and awards. One of the cornerstones of sharing expertise is our initiative of the International Training Center for Conservation in collaboration with the Palace Museum in Beijing. This has provided opportunities for conservation professionals from around the world and China. I say that specifically because it's a Chinese rest of the world program. So it has provided colleagues from around the world in China in the wonderful setting of the Palace Museum. And this year we held a 2-week workshop with world-leading experts in the conservation of paintings, including an international symposium celebrating 100 years of the Palace Museum. And applications have for our next program next year on the conservation of wooden furniture have just closed, and we are sifting through delegates as I speak. We are also working with colleagues from around the globe on international standards on the conservation of cultural heritage, which brings together international experts to achieve global consensus on issues that matters to us all. And ISO 349 conservation of cultural heritage is this example, and we're quite heavily involved in that. But coming closer to the actual topic of my talk, ISE has taken quite an active leadership role in sustainability for some time now. In 2021, we convened a joint commitment for climate action and cultural heritage conservation between ISE, ICOM, and ICOM-CC, which was launched at COP26 in Glasgow in 2021, followed by the ISE Net Zero pilot, aligned to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Race to Zero Partnership Campaign, and the Sustainable Development Goals to help the conservation field drive positive change and set a credible path to the net zero with science-based targets. To embed net zero and promote climate leadership globally, ISE has developed Innovate, a program on sustainability and leadership for new times, funded by the Getty Foundation, and focused on sustainability, leadership, and innovation. And 30 Innovate scholars representing 26 countries from emerging economies took part in a program of action learning with masterclasses exploring themes such as the circular economy, environmental decision-making, and climate justice. In an ever-changing and fast-paced world, aiming to be sustainable, museums and communities face challenges bearing the question whether we should redefine growth and success, not in terms of scale, but maybe in terms of impact, and should we promote new models of value within museums, focusing on social relevance, environmental responsibility, and community well-being? Should we now be tracking success through inclusive programming, reduced carbon footprints, ethical collecting, and meaningful partnerships with local communities? Within ISC and its global membership programs, we know that conservators play an increasingly important role in the intersection of art, science, environment, and community. And there are many real-world examples of how museums collaborate with local communities to co-create programs that amplify marginalized voices and promote heritage conservation in ways that are more focused on how much they contribute to people, place, and planet. And ultimately, mutual growth of museums and their communities depends on embracing participatory practices, ethical stewardship, and long-term vision. And the three case studies that I will briefly introduce to you, and for which ISC has provided seed funding, are, I think, outstanding examples of what new, different leadership might look like. Aligning with SDGs 4, 9, 12, 13, and 17, Innovate scholar Marina Valdez addressed the critical need to integrate sustainability into heritage conservation by evaluating materials based on both technical performance and environmental impact. Many commonly used materials in conservation are biodegradable, difficult to reuse, and potentially harmful, with limited accessible guidance for institutions lacking conservators. This project aimed at providing tools to support informed decision-making, optimizing material use, and promote environmentally responsible, sustainable practices in cultural heritage management. The project included a national survey of conservation professionals to understand commonly used materials, providing a comprehensive view of current practices across Argentina. Her work blends scientific rigor with environmental consciousness and community values, paving the way for more planet-friendly cultural heritage preservation. Innovate scholar Omar Itsnain's Green Museum Hub a project in Morocco provides a digital platform where museum professionals, exhibition designers, and suppliers can exchange ideas and success stories, thus fostering a community of best practice. The platform supports museums in adopting sustainable exhibition practices by providing accessible resources on eco-friendly materials and methods. Aligning with SDGs 11, 12, 13, and 17, the Green Museum Hub connects institutions with suppliers, offers guidance, and offers case studies, and thereby enabling informed and timely decisions. By reducing barriers such as limited time and knowledge, it fosters collaboration, innovation, and resilience. The platform also strengthens local economies and helps reduce waste, emissions, and resource consumption, positioning museums as leaders in environmental responsibility and cultural sustainability. And in my last case study, Innovate scholar Roda Kalondu Lange from the Karen Blixen Museum under the National Museums of Kenya, is leading a 3-year community-driven climate action for all initiative to combat climate change and promote sustainability. Aligned with Kenya's tree planting directive and the UN SDGs 13 and 15, the project focuses on reforestation, waste management, and community empowerment. Activities include planting 5,000 indigenous and fruit trees, implementing zero waste and recycling programs with youth groups, and engaging Nyumba Kumi households through participatory discussions. By restoring forests, reducing pollution, and fostering resilience, the museum advances environmental stewardship and safeguards Kenya's natural heritage. At ISC, we strongly believe that involving local communities to co-create programs that amplify marginalized voices and promote heritage might offer alternative and more sustainable solutions for the future. The success is measured not only by numbers, but by the level of engagement and the quality of experience. And I've obviously used up much less of my time slot than I had been allocated, but hopefully at the end of this conference and this very long day, this isn't too unwelcome. And I believe I'm going to be followed by 2 colleagues from the Getty in LA who have been, and as you know, Getty has been a partner in our Innovate programs, so I'm really happy to meet our colleagues there as well. And with that, thank you very much. And
thanks, Jürgen. Would you mind if we pose a question to you now from the audience, since we have a few minutes?
That's absolutely fine. Yeah, if there are any.
This allows us, just in case people are logging in at specific times for talks, that way we're not starting before they're able to join us. We have a couple of questions flowing in, and for those who have not seen the message in the chat, we're having a few technical issues with Slido, so if you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the Zoom chat. Jürgen, can you talk a little bit about the different strategies that IIC, ICOM, and ICOM-CC bring to the collaborative efforts towards the sustainable cultural heritage sector?
That's a good question. I guess we are all coming from a slightly different angle to this, and you know, IIC is very much an organization for conservation professionals and those who have an interest in the conservation of heritage, but we're looking a lot at individual members coming with, you know, a certain expertise. We're probably focusing on collections more than on built heritage, and maybe, you know, ICOM is focusing, probably it's fair to say, more on institutions as such rather than individual members, and ICOM probably more likely looking at built heritage. So whilst we have a lot in common in terms of, you know, what we want to achieve, we're talking to different people, and we have different ways of in which we can respond. IIC is a UK-based charity, even though an internationally operating charity. But as a charitable organization, we are in a position, provided we attract funds, to also give funds. That's, you know, not necessarily the case for other organizations. This is where the Innovate program, you know, comes into play, where we've been in a position, together with Getty's help, to support individual activities. That's not necessarily the way that ICOM might be able to operate. So I think we're basically all slightly different players, with, you know, very similar aims.
That's great. That's super helpful. Actually, that was a great question because I also, I think it's a little fuzzy for me too, but that helped a lot. Thank you. How can museums redefine success to prioritize social relevance, environmental responsibility, and community well-being? And, in your mind, what role do conservators specifically play in advancing those sorts of things, sustainability, social relevance, community well-being?
That's got to be the biggest question of all, I think. In my experience, most, be they museum directors or directors of I don't know, historic houses or archives or libraries, you name it. Usually their success, and traditionally, would have been measured in mostly in numbers, wouldn't it? It's visitor growth, it's reach, it's more exhibitions, it's maybe increasing the collection. So it's success is really measured in numbers, and then they tend to come in for a term, maybe that might be extended, and the extension might depend on the success they've had, which again would have been measured in numbers. And we really need to get to a mindset change here. I think that's the challenge. How can we influence these decisions, and then say, actually, maybe it's a success to be the most sustainable organization, or maybe it's a success if most of your visitors came from your local communities. But I think it's only through dialogue we can achieve that. There's just no other way, and it's a fundamental societal change. And whether that's in heritage organizations or elsewhere in other industries, it's how this defining success is. It's a mindset, and it comes with the way we work as mostly around the globe. And that's probably a long journey.
Yeah, and it's evolving too. The metrics, whether it's quantitative or qualitative that we're using to define success, I think it changes depending on what's pressing in our local, national, international spaces in that moment. Yeah, absolutely. I think we have time for one quick question, and then I'll switch us over to the dialogue if that works for you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Jürgen, does IIC decide which aspects of sustainability to focus on?
Well, I guess that's also the outcome of a conversation. I don't think there's a decision to say this is what we have to do, or this is what IIC wants you to do. I think it's this exchange of ideas, and it's a kind of collaborative process, I think.
Absolutely. That theme of it depends, and that conversation, I think, has been part of, all of our thoughts and part of the responses of a lot of the folks that we've been speaking with over the length of this conference. So, okay, well, with that, thank you so much. And I'll give you a call back in a few minutes, and we'll have a conversation between you and Tom and Lori.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Jürgen.
Okay. See you later. Thank you.
Lori, Tom, can I invite you to the metaphorical stage? Great. Hi, Lori. Hi, Tom. I'll go ahead and introduce you both. Lori is the Senior Program Officer at the Getty. Her work currently focuses on longer-term strategies for innovative management and protection of heritage sites. Lori's talk is titled Resilience Through Conservation, Leadership and Sustainability. Go ahead, Laurie, and then I'll introduce Tom before you present.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm just gonna share my screen.
Looks great.
Excellent. So hello, everybody, and warm greetings from Los Angeles. So I'm really happy to be here with all of you today, and I just want to thank the conference organizers for the invitation to join this event. So again, my name is Lori Wong, and I'm a conservator at the Getty Foundation. And I'll be speaking today about strengthening ecosystems of resilience in conservation through grant making. And I hope you'll find that this is a fitting topic for the final session on resilient resources and partnerships. So the Getty Foundation carries out the philanthropic mission of the J. Paul Getty Trust by supporting individuals and institutions worldwide committed to advancing the understanding and preservation of the visual arts. And today I'm going to be focusing specifically on our conservation grant making. So how we protect and preserve art and cultural heritage globally through strategic initiatives. And I'll be highlighting a couple of examples that illustrate how we aim to build resilience across the sector. And I just will point out that unlike other institutions, our focus of grant making is really on building resilience in the conservation field. And I think you'll also hear similar things from my colleague Tom following this presentation. So throughout this conference, we've been hearing how conservation professionals are really having to navigate accelerating climate impacts, financial pressures, shifting institutional priorities. These challenges are interconnected and often unpredictable. So our responses must also be equally interconnected and also adaptive. So at the Getty Foundation, we view the conservation field as an ecosystem. So it is one that is made up of individuals like all of you, as well as institutions, communities, and basically as a network that connects and gains strength from one another. There is no single organization that can meet today's challenges alone. But I think together we can build a field that is more agile, responsive, and capable of sustaining long-term stewardship of our heritage. So how do we do this? And I'm going to just present a couple of examples, and I will acknowledge Jürgen, and I will be talking about a similar example. And so I love this kind of network that we're already seeing, this kind of ecosystem in action. So one key way we build resilience is by investing in conservation professionals. The foundation supports training, career development, and mobility, including fellowships, internships, and travel grants to attend major international conferences, such as the recent ICOM meeting that happened in Dubai last month, and as well the upcoming ICOM-CC conference in Oslo that will be happening next September. And yesterday, and I'm going to touch upon also the inspiring talk from Mariana Valdez and her colleague from Argentina that you just heard about from Jürgen. And their work grew out of a grant from the Getty Foundation to IIC, as you heard, for the 2024 Congress in Lima. And this grant also enabled these live regional hubs to take place across countries in South America, and also enabled the online participation for professionals in Africa and Southeast Asia. Now, I'm just going to highlight one other grant initiative, and this is the grant initiative called Conserving Canvas. And I'll just note the question that I think I've heard in a few Q&As, which is, how do we as a field ensure the transfer of knowledge and skills? How do we ensure that it's passed from one generation of conservators to the next? So in 2018, there was growing concern amongst the conservation profession that essential techniques for the structural repair of canvas paintings were being lost. This includes such methods as wax resin and glue paste lining, also such things as thread mending and reweaving techniques. And in response to this, the foundation launched the Conserving Canvas initiative to help rebuild these skills through hands-on training, workshops, scientific research, convenings, and also the creation of fellowship opportunities. And you see here on the screen just some examples of some of these projects and some of the problems affecting canvas paintings. This initiative has gone on to award 39 grants, excuse me, across 32 institutions in Europe, United States, in Latin America, and in Australia. And these active projects are now concluding this year, which will bring a close to this initiative. But I want to draw your attention to one of the core features of the Conserving Canvas initiative, which has been to allow for these intensive practical workshops. And you see 2 images here. And these workshops really give emerging and mid-career conservators the chance to practice structural repairs. They have helped to rebuild the confidence and expertise in traditional interventions, while also encouraging thoughtful decision-making about when and perhaps when not to use specific techniques. And the examples here are, and some of the colleagues might be on the call, from Schral in the Netherlands, and also on the left, the workshop that took place just a few months ago at the Dallas Museum of Art, which was focused on conservators across the Americas. Now, this initiative also emphasized the importance of convening. An international conference on canvas painting conservation was held at Yale, and this was the first of its kind since 1974. And it brought together painting conservators to reconsider and redefine structural practices. And its 400 seats sold out almost immediately, and it just was a clear indication of the demand for shared learning and dialogue. And I think that gatherings like that conference and also like this one today are really essential. They create the conditions for knowledge exchange and the strengthening of networks that we have heard so much about that will sustain this field into the future. So these examples that I've shown show that resilience in conservation, it isn't built through isolated projects or by any single institution. It grows through the intentional transfer of ideas, skills, and also the building of relationships. So when institutions share resources, when professionals form supportive networks, and when regional strategies emerge from collective knowledge, and the conservation ecosystem becomes stronger, more diverse, and more adaptable. And I think this matters now more than ever, as climate change and political volatility and economic uncertainty are reshaping the conditions in which our heritage exists. But these challenges have also sparked remarkable ingenuity from transferring knowledge and skills across generations to building regional hubs and these collaborative networks like those that we heard from by our IIC colleagues at their last Congress. So at the Getty Foundation, our role is really to help connect and to support these efforts, to strengthen individual nodes and to link them together. And looking ahead, we see a pressing need to support sustainability efforts in the field and to address the challenges of climate adaptation of our cultural heritage. So as I conclude, the question for all of us, I think, should be, how can we scale up this work collectively and ensure the field has the capacity, the coordination, and the resilience it needs to meet what lies ahead? And we believe at the Foundation that the conservation field is strongest when we work together. So by leveraging partnerships, sharing resources, and building communities of practice, we can safeguard cultural heritage in ways that endure. So I want to thank all of you for being here, and I really look forward to the conversations and also the collaborations that will continue to grow from this session.
Thanks, Laurie. All right, Tom, if you want to load up your presentations. Tom Lerner is the head of science at the Getty Conservation Institute. He oversees the Institute's scientific research and implements projects that advance conservation practice in the visual arts. Tom is going to talk to us today about building resilience into the work of the Getty Conservation Institute.
Thank you, Melissa. Oh, excuse me. A second good morning from Los Angeles. I will follow, I think, quite nicely on from Laurie's presentation to talk about a different part of the Getty and how we, the Conservation Institute, as everyone, I think, is attempting to build resilience into the work we do. I wonder whether Laurie is going to show this slide, and I'm actually glad she didn't, because it means I'm glad I did, just to give a sort of broader sense of who the Getty are. The Getty is a pretty complicated art institution, and the simplified version is there are 4 programs, of which the Museum and the Research Institute are not represented here. The Foundation and my institution, the GCI, Getty Conservation Institute, I think we both consider ourselves outward-looking parts of the Getty, even though we do work very closely with the collections of the museum and GRI. The vast majority of our work is external, looking at the conservation field and how we as an institution can help to advance conservation practice there. Within the GCI, the part of the institution that I oversee is the science department, and we're a very well-resourced science lab for a cultural institution. So therefore, the pressure is on to kind of make most use of those resources in the most effective and efficient way. The work we do is sort of categorized into 5 major research areas: technical studies, materials characterization, preventive conservation, treatment studies, and a group dedicated to built heritage research. So within the GCI, we have been, I thought I'd actually illustrate some of the ways that we're thinking about resilience through some projects. And I have, most of my talk will be on a large initiative, a long-term initiative we are in the middle of, the Managing Collection Environments Initiative. It's a fairly major project for us. And in response to some of the questions that we've been hearing about today and at other conferences, specifically about museum environments and what happens between the sort of 2 extremes of very tightly controlled and very expensive and very carbon hungry environmental control, where humidity in particular is kept very, very stable, to instances where environmental fluctuations have most certainly created damage in artworks. And as everybody knows, the pressure is on to explore how far the parameters can be extended or relaxed or made more flexible without getting into the riskier zone of damage. We started our project pretty much in the middle of this whole debate and initiative, and a very, very brief and broad timeline here with some of the major global events listed at the top. And basically in the 80s and 90s, it was still fairly established for institutions that could have afforded to have a HVAC system to be running it at a very, very precise control level. In the early 2000s, discussions were starting to appear about how parameters could be broadened safely. And the Smithsonian was one of many institutions. I personally remember this moment where in some of their museums, a statement was made to relax slightly further. In the 2010s, which is where we started our initiative, when the BISO group had made their initial proposal to relax to these wider parameters, which was quite quickly endorsed by the major conservation bodies. But as many people know, change has been incredibly slow, especially in parts of the world. And despite refreshing the Green Protocol, we feel there's still huge amounts of effort needed to move this forward. And I won't go into this in too much detail, but our own project, we decided after thinking about how best we could apply some of our resources and our skill sets were these 5 points: through science, through creating tools, engaging with some of the critical dialogue that's still ongoing, and specifically move into looking at case studies, which I'm going to mention in the next few slides, ultimately to develop a range of sustainable environmental management approaches for collections around the world, and always balancing these 3 aspects: the access, preservation, and resources available. So one of the ways we are approaching this is through the use of scientific research, perhaps not surprising from science department. 2 of the ways we found particularly helpful are sort of both extremes of the instrumentation spectrum. 2 on the right is our actually very expensive nano indenter instrument that sits inside an environmental chamber, but it is extraordinarily sensitive to looking at changes in mechanical or physical properties as humidity and temperature fluctuate. Even though we don't feel that many other places can afford to have one of these instruments, we do make it very available to colleagues from around the world. And in fact, this instrument is probably the piece of equipment that we get most requests for to come and use. On the other part of the spectrum, acoustic emission monitoring that we found to be very, very affordable, a way of monitoring specific pieces in situ, and actually listening out for the sounds of molecules breaking, which are the precursor to an actual physical crack. So it's an early warning system where specific pieces can be monitored. And the technology here is advancing pretty rapidly, and systems, in fact, are often now appearing well below the $10,000 mark. A couple of case studies. One of the ones that's had a lot of attention recently was a study we did with the National Gallery Victoria in Melbourne. They were having to make the change to the BESO protocol settings through a city-based requirement. So we were actually contacted to think about ways of monitoring, in their view, one of the more vulnerable pieces as this change was being made. We set up our acoustic emission system, the 16th century Flemish retable at the back of the gallery here, and you can see some computer screens to the right. I've got a close-up coming next. On the left, you can see one of the sensors attached to the actual retable. There were sensors at the back and the front. And as the conditions went from very strict 50% plus or minus a small amount to the 40-60 limits, absolutely no sounds were detected. The piece had obviously been through all kinds of quite broad environmental parameters before it ever experienced HVAC systems. And this is perhaps not typical of all air handling units, but in this particular air handling unit for this part of the gallery, the energy savings were quite extraordinary, just moving from the very tight to the BESO conditions. A second case study we did more recently was with the V&A in London. This was actually a slightly different approach in that the V&A had been very open in announcing that in certain galleries they'd never been able to achieve very good environmental control. It's a historic building, and all the reasons that can be complicated. And we did similar testing with acoustic emission and with another technique to monitor the condition of pieces, and compared to similar measurements that had been made 10 years prior, again, there was actually no detected difference in any of the pieces that we looked at, and which showed that actually, as has long been known by many people, that a vast majority of works in collections are incredibly resilient themselves to broader environmental parameters.
Hi, Tom. One more minute, please.
Got it. Thank you. Yes, I can see I'm drifting a little bit. I just wanted to, well, quickly, as part of this, in addition to science, we are very engaged in workshops and dissemination of information and through free publications. I did just want to follow up with two other things to build on this network idea. One of those that we're really active in right now is looking at microfade testing, where so many people are purchasing these instruments, often without dedicated users. And there's a very dynamic and growing network that we're very happy to sort of be a part of establishing that and walking through the benefits of that. And I know something we spoke about in our early discussions, Melissa, was that there are often times where stopping a network generating initiative is the right thing to do. A project I was involved with for a long time, looking at cleaning of acrylic paints, there was a time where so much activity was being generated around the world, all new sort of cleaning systems, that I felt it was right that our catalyst to get these things going had been achieved, and it was actually an important decision to step back completely. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom and Laurie. Those are great presentations. You're getting a lot of accolades. I don't know if you can see in the chat, lots of claps and hearts. And I actually think, before I dive in, Laurie, would you mind coming back on screen? Great. I think that was, sort of where you wrapped up, Tom, is a great way to sort of launch this conversation. I think it's so important, we're always dealing with sort of constrained resources, and just thinking about our future and where the field is headed, it seems like that's, only going to stay true, if not get more difficult. And while I think we all love what we do and we always want to say yes to projects, one of the ways in which we can kind of address these constrained resources is sunsetting projects. And I would love to hear from both of you and your thinking about the sector as a whole. Is what is a good way to sort of address that? How are we deciding what projects should continue on and what ones either can live on without us or, have sort of lived their life and can be completed? Who wants to start?
Your turn, Laurie.
Yeah, I'll jump in from the perspective of the foundation because, and I said this in my talk, that we are really in support of the conservation sector. So we are always in listening mode to the profession and to understand what the needs and priorities are. So it's not just us doing a project. It is really in close communication with all of our conservation colleagues around the world. So I think it's a kind of joint decision when an initiative has run its course and we've planted enough seeds, I guess, to allow for the project to continue to grow on its own. So I think that would be from my perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a really hard thing to I find to kind of specify this. It's a constant dialogue. I think as nice as it sounds that we can somehow talk to the field and get a unified, agreed version of what the needs are, so we can address those. Of course, that doesn't happen at all. We have all kinds of competing needs around the world. So there has to be some kind of curation or whatever you'd want to call it. I think a factor that often plays into it is our own existing skills and expertise. If there's a nice fit with something that we know we could use our instrumentation or staff backgrounds, to kind of work towards, that can be a factor. I think sometimes you just have to kind of be the sort of network and just connected. You start to realize things that are propping up a little bit more common than other things. I think for both the foundation and ourselves right now, we both go through these sort of strategic planning processes, and a lot of the emphasis, certainly from the GCI's point of view, which I hope we achieve, we're just sort of launching on this, is to really try and refocus on underrepresented parts of the world, or types of conservation or types of artwork, where I think it's nice that we can use our resources somehow to not just to go where all the attention is and sort of be part of that. So there's lots of factors, and I mean the acrylic paints example of stopping was an easy one for me to talk about because I made that decision and I kind of had worked on it for so long, and there were other things, but it did feel strategically right. I mean, maybe we should have stopped it a bit earlier. I just don't know. There's not a moment that is the right time. But that one just felt that there was so much activity, and in some of the workshops we were delivering, we weren't able to include a lot of the new novel cleaning systems that were being developed, and people were finding really useful. So it just felt that it isn't right that we continue to do this particular sort of workshop. But yeah, lots of considerations, and it's really hard to kind of. It's probably the thing we get asked the most. How do you choose your projects? But actually, it's a really hard thing to answer succinctly.
Absolutely. And, as we heard earlier from Elke, we're only seeing a growth in possibilities and projects and areas of interest that people want to do good work in. So it's only getting harder. Great news. Yeah. In our earlier conversation, we talked a little bit about how both of you sort of came to your really cool and really unique roles within the Getty, sort of focusing on conservation as a sector, and to steal your word, Laurie, looking at the ecosystem of conservation. And you transition from being sort of practitioners, whether you're, conservation scientists or built heritage conservator, to these more managerial, strategic, long-term thinking roles. And I was just hoping you could talk a little bit more about what led you to taking this step, and why you think it was sort of important that we're doing this work at a sector level, at an ecosystem level.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa, for that question. Yeah, so I'm a conservator. I spent most of my career working on built heritage projects. So moving to the foundation was actually a big choice because it dramatically changed the type of work I do. So I shifted from myself doing the work to actually enabling other people to do projects. And I think that there is importance in that because the field right now, we're such a small sector, and we're actually a young field still. So I do think there is a need to look at the health and sustainability of the sector itself. So I think, for me at least, moving into this position in the foundation, gave me this opportunity to engage with the conservation field, to try to understand what are the needs and priorities that everybody is dealing with, and just to try to do our part to strengthen the field as a whole. So, I think there is just, it's important for some of us within the field to take that path, I guess, as well. And it's also important for people to stay in practice, and we will work together. So yeah, that's from me.
Thanks, Laurie. Anything to add, Tom?
Oh yeah. No, I never set out into conservation thinking I'd ever be in this position. So it wasn't sort of a planned strategic, I'm going to do this to get to this position. So I think it's true for Laurie as well, that it's a lot of it's down to just luck and timing and opportunity, and these things come along, and it could be all kinds of reasons. So when I became the department head in the science department, it was 10 years ago now, I think, maybe even more. But I didn't feel it was the right time for me at all. I just felt I was quite happy, in my own weeds of looking at modern contemporary art and the rest of it. But it was just a sort of a decision I made, and God knows if I was being guided by some greater force or something. But I have to say, within a couple of years of going through fairly major imposter syndrome, I have adored it, and I think what Laurie says is spot on. And I think, especially now, the sort of the climate we're in right now, that ability to put what we do into a much broader context and think about, you know, some really significant things happening, that sort of focus on things that we're so passionate about, was something that I just was getting less interested in and wanting to think more about these sort of larger issues and how we fit into that. So it was just great timing for me, and I've have to say, I think you said it was a really cool job. It is a really cool job. I absolutely love it.
Oh, well, thank you both so much. I am going to switch us now over to questions from the audience, and I'm going to invite Jürgen back. Jürgen, if you're still with us, can you turn on your camera? Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, Jürgen.
Hi, Jürgen.
Hi, both.
Feel free, audience members, to continue submitting your questions. I believe Slido is now back up and running, but if Zoom is still working for you, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll consolidate on our end. So I'd like to start off with this question, and this is geared towards you, Laurie. When working across diverse regions of the world with different concepts of what conservation is, how do you avoid imposing Western-centric approaches?
That's a great question. So whoever asked it, thank you. I think it has to do with partnerships, and I think it has to do with how the projects are organized. And I think we need to ensure in our projects, and I think Tom will probably would say the same in terms of how the foundation works, is that it is crucial for us to understand who are the stakeholders that should be involved. And I think that very much involves the people on the ground. And that involves local experts. It's also about looking at communities who are engaging with the objects or collections or sites. And I know this is a big issue about how the conservation sector intersects with local knowledge and indigenous practices. And I think it's something that we all need to do our best to stay aware of and to keep having that conversation with each other to remind ourselves of the importance of that, because I think it is very important.
Thanks. Tom, did you want to add anything to that? I know Laurie kind of threw that to you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really complicated, this, and as much as, you know, Western people, especially a white male, whatever, you know, I tick all those boxes of it's fine to say we listen, but to me that isn't enough, and I think it's a massive learning curve. It's a massive being able to kind of pull everybody back from what they feel might be quite important, and this sort of concept of, you know, best practice and all the rest of it is just, can we please not say that, because that just feels to be doing just what you said. How do we avoid? So it's a constant thing, and I love opportunities where people from the non-West or non-North or whatever it is come to us with ideas and could we help on this thing. It's a much easier thing to do it that way rather than, you know, try and influence and impose in a positive way. I would say one program that I think we've been a bit successful on, maybe quite successful on, is our guest scholar program. So the Getty has a very active scholar program, and the GCI has a small scholarship program, in resident scholarship program, but it's definitely something that we have absolutely challenged ourselves to move it away from the sort of end of career big names who come in and write something for 3 to 6 months. We've moved, and it took a while, because so a program like that has a reputation, and people think, oh, this is not for me because I'm too young, or I'm not established, or I haven't published, or I haven't, whatever it is that the West might dictate you should be doing. So it's taken a while, but I mean, we're now very, very successful, I think, in having a very kind of diverse group of individuals, where things like we might have asked people for, you know, a list of publications or a kind of writing example. It took a while, but we've stopped doing that, because that's an absolute, you're judging people on their ability to, you know, conform to a certain Western standard. So it's lovely to be able to do that, to encourage people to come in from other parts of the world. This year in particular, we have somebody from Palestine, we have somebody from Zimbabwe, we have somebody who came in from an indigenous conservator from New Zealand, and all of them are challenging us, and all of them, to have someone in residence for 3 months, that it's a great way for us to kind of absorb what we're being told.
Sounds like a great program. I have this question, and it's directed at you, Tom, but I think it's, you know, it's applicable for everybody. So I'd like to round robin this. Tom, you talked about the BASO program, the BASO protocols in your talk, and how it's sort of widely accepted, but we've had a really hard time as a sector implementing. And I'm curious what you all think would be what we should be doing now, what we can do to actually move that needle and towards implementing it.
Sure, and I should preface this by saying this is what I'm about to say is my feelings, because even within our MC group, we have different opinions about this and how we should be approaching it. My current thinking is actually to pull away completely from the sort of trying to convince people, this idea that you could do more and more research and somehow people will see the light suddenly, or you can do workshopping and then people understand how to influence their director and they'll go back and talk. It just feels it's an important part of what we do, but in fact, there are so many institutions and people who are making change, who either have to make change or want to make change. It could be enforced on them. It could be, you know, a visionary director who says we need to do this. So we're trying to kind of make life easier for ourselves, but also, you know, you take out a big chunk of the problem just by case studies. You can show certain things can happen. So the Naturkunde Victoria example was done for exactly that reason, because we were approached by them, and it's worked. You know, they've now gone fully BASO in all their galleries. They were nominated for this ICOM award for sustainability development in museums. It's been recognized as a really key part of the puzzle, and the hope is that if more museums do this and nothing happens to the collection, or, you know, nothing more than you'd expect normally, then those museums that are more reluctant or less willing to kind of lead in this will probably find it harder to resist. And I do believe also that, I think of someone of the previous sessions spoke about this a little bit, about the institutions without resources. So if it's collections from around the world in very, very wide, you know, climates, where HVAC was never an option, to really think about the state of those collections, because in most cases they're doing absolutely fine. You know, of course there are exceptions, of course there are things that we need to be aware of, but to kind of, for us to learn from people, you know, less resourced institutions that have never had the luxury, to kind of provide another layer of reassurance.
Laurie, Jürgen, you want to add to that?
I mean, I guess I would say that perhaps, I mean, there's a lot of emphasis on BASO, and I think it is the sector as a whole. I think we need to be focused on how we want to position ourselves within the climate crisis. And that involves not just BASO, but other aspects of sustainability, as we've been hearing over the past few days. So, you know, I think there's so much attention placed on BASO and helping museums get there. But as Tom said, there are many parts of the world that are already facing huge challenges in terms of financial costs, and don't have the luxury to be thinking about shifting parameters this way. I think also education is important for the sector. I think carbon literacy training would be good and useful for everyone. I think it's not just conservators who are part of this decision. It's a very complex ecosystem in museums that everybody will be well aware of. So it is also about bringing everybody aligned with the with the mission of sustainability. I think it's a great opportunity for conservation professionals to be leading that discussion because of the work that people are doing in this area.
I wonder if sorry. I wonder if it's a thing around whether we need to stop kidding ourselves that we can keep things forever, because we can't anyway. We will never keep things forever, and I think that's just a constantly changing conversation as to how much change and how much deterioration is acceptable for the circumstances you're in, and that's financial circumstances, at environmental and climate circumstances, that's just overall societal circumstances, and so everybody will have different answers to what they think might be acceptable. And because in a way, we could say, well, if we want to keep something for as long as possible, then we probably would have to just pack it away anyway, and not have it on display, and don't access it, and and nobody wants that, so that doesn't make any sense. So I think we just need to have a more relaxed, but maybe also a more open conversation within our respective organizations, what that actually means for us, and what change are we willing to accept, and some of it will be, I think, as Tom said, some of that will be forced on us at some point. It's looking increasingly likely that we will have +2 by the middle of the century, probably more by the end, maybe 3.5, who knows. At the moment, it doesn't look like we're on course of stopping this trajectory. We will be forced to make different decisions all around the world. So we might as well just start thinking about it more openly and maybe a bit more relaxed.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we can choose to accept a certain higher level of risk tolerance, or we could be forced into it later, because that is the direction that we're headed in. Okay, I've got a question here for Jürgen. How to reconcile the notions of participatory approaches and amplification of marginalized voices with current adverse political and societal trends? I'll repeat that because I stumbled through it. How do you reconcile the notions of participatory approaches and amplification of marginalized voices with current adverse political and societal trends?
I'm not sure.
That's a big one, yeah.
I'm to be honest, I'm not even entirely sure if I fully understand the question. I'm sorry. I don't even know where to start, I'm afraid.
No worries. I think maybe I'll put this in my own personal lens, so hopefully I'm understanding it. It sounds like the question is asking, when we're talking about conservation, doing more participatory work, how are we doing this in a way, how should we be doing this in a way that is supportive of marginalized voices and amplifying them? How do we find that balance? Is there a balance?
Well, I don't think there is one answer, because that will be very different from community to community. Whether we're in Southeast Asia or in the North Americas, there will be different sensitivities, different approaches, and it's really about this exchange of ideas and discourse and understanding each other. And so I don't think there is a generic solution to that. It's it's communication and exchange of ideas and truly it's about listening and truly understanding each other. I think that would be the key.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we have time for one more question here. Let's see. Lori, how does one build a more dynamic and sustainable ecosystem in conservation that continuously and effectively adapts to sort of these risks that we're facing that are kind of emerging and we're learning about as we go?
I mean, I think it's an ongoing dynamic process. So I guess, as we are all learning, and I think the climate crisis is a perfect example of that. We are trying to, figure out how we can build resilience in the sector in the face of climate change. And, we're having to look at climate data, we're having to look at climate projections. As Jürgen already alluded to, we don't know what the scenario will be, but we do know that the challenges are ahead for us. So I think, it's an iterative approach. We need to do what we can, but we also need to realize that there, may be difficult choices we have to make. In the field itself, I think we need to learn to adapt. And I think that's where it's difficult. It's difficult to, change the way we were trained, change the way that education programs are training the next generation. So what does the conservation sector look like in the face of the climate crisis, and how can we get out ahead? I feel like often we've gone from scenario planning to disaster planning, and this is the new reality. So it is just, I think we all need to be working together, and that's all of us. Whether we are in representing an institution like IIC or as Thomas with the GCI or with the foundation, we need to be thinking collectively about how to better build resilience in the field. So I don't know if that's really addressing the question, but yeah, it is an ongoing dynamic process.
Absolutely. No, I think you nailed it, Lori. And I think it's an interesting conversation because we're all sort of simultaneously trying to address it in our daily lives, in our practices, while also bringing up the next sort of generation of professionals in this field. And what are we communicating to them and what are we teaching them to do and address these emerging risks? I know many moons ago when I was studying to enter this sort of museum field, one of the mottos that a mentor communicated to me was good enough is the enemy of greatness. And it always sort of stuck in my head. And now that we're looking at all of these risks and accepting maybe more risk tolerance in our lives, that sort of has percolated back to the top of my brain. And what are we doing? And is that a healthy approach to our work? This sort of need for full control, for perfection, when we're maybe having to rebalance and reprioritize. With that, I just want to say a big thank you to you all for sharing your thoughts and answering all of these fabulous questions from our audience. That is all the time we have for the Q&A period, but we do now have some time to talk with you all on a more conversational and dialogical method. We have the Meet the Speakers session next. And I think momentarily you should all get the options to join a breakout room, or momentarily that'll be coming up. Feel free to conversation hop to join one. whatever floats your boat. And just a final, again, thank you to speakers, participants, planning committee members for all the wonderful work and conversations from today. All right, and with that, I'll leave you to it. Hey, well, thank you everyone who's still with us, who stayed with us for the full day. You know, it's been just a pleasure, and I know I personally have just learned so much from the questions that you all are asking and want to learn more about, to all of the things that our presenters shared with us today. So big thank you all around. Tomorrow is our fourth and final day of the conference. And I just want to make special mention, we're starting 30 minutes early tomorrow because we have a packed day. So that's 13:30 UTC. And tomorrow's focus will be on looking ahead to the future of museum and collections resilience through a mix of forward-looking topics such as biometric approaches, digitization, and the integration of AI in building management and collections care. This day is going to explore the innovative solutions that prepare museums to meet the challenges of tomorrow. So with that, I just want to say thank you to all of the organizations that you see on the screen. If our planning committee members want to come online, turn on their video and say thank you and wish our participants well, feel free to do so. And a big thank you to Prince Media, our IT team, for helping us run this conference so smoothly. With that, I'll say thank you and have a great rest of your day or night or afternoon, depending on where you are.